Imagine this: a devoted wife, 7 months pregnant, picks up her millionaire husband's forgotten phone at the doctor's office, and her perfect world shatters. A secret text reveals a hidden son, twins on the way, and a double life with her former best friend. But that's just the beginning. What if the betrayal runs deeper: financial fraud, multiple mistresses, shocking DNA twists, and even darker secrets that could destroy everything? From heart-wrenching confrontations to courtroom battles and ultimate redemption, this story of survival and empowerment will keep you hooked with non-stop twists. Stick around to hear how one woman's nightmare turns into her greatest triumph. If you're as gripped as I am, hit that like button if you love epic drama. Comment your biggest plot twist prediction below. Share this with a friend who needs some inspiration. And subscribe for more mind-blowing stories like this. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Let's dive in. Sarah Davidson adjusted her maternity dress as she settled into the familiar waiting room chair at Dr. Martinez's office. At 42 and 7 months pregnant, these routine checkups had become a welcome break from the isolation of her Hamptons estate. Rick had promised to meet her here, but as usual, his business calls took priority. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's priorities, had grown accustomed to attending appointments alone. She glanced at the empty chair beside her, then noticed Rick's iPhone buzzing on the side table. He must have forgotten it during his rushed exit from their morning argument about his upcoming business trip to Singapore. Sarah picked up the phone, intending to silence it, when a text notification lit up the screen. Her heart stopped as she read the sender, Isabella Business, and the preview message that would shatter her world. Our son asks when Daddy is coming home again. The twins are kicking. They'll be here soon. Time seemed to slow as Sarah's mind processed the words. Our son, the twins. Her hands trembled as she scrolled through more messages, each one revealing a deeper layer of betrayal. Photos of a little boy with Rick's distinctive green eyes, ultrasound images dated just weeks after her own, a message from Isabella saying, I can't wait for our family to be complete. The millionaire marriage secrets exposed in those few text messages hit Sarah like a physical blow. 18 years of what she thought was a perfect marriage crumbled in an instant. The frequent business trips, the late nights at the office, the way Rick had grown distant during her pregnancy. It all made horrible sense now. Mrs. Davidson. The nurse's voice seemed to come from underwater. Dr. Martinez will see you now. Sarah stood on unsteady legs, clutching the phone like evidence of a crime. She followed the nurse through the familiar hallway, her mind racing with questions and disbelief. How long had this been going on? Who was Isabella? And most devastatingly, how could the man she'd loved and trusted for nearly 2 decades do this to her while she carried his child after the appointment? Sarah drove directly to Rick's Manhattan office building, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white. The 40-minute drive gave her time to cycle through every emotion: shock, anger, heartbreak, and a growing determination to confront the man who had destroyed her world. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt eternal. Sarah had visited Rick's office countless times over the years, often bringing him lunch or attending company parties where she played the perfect supportive wife. Now she saw the gleaming corporate environment differently. Had Isabella walked these same halls? Had Rick's colleagues known about the affair, while Sarah remained blissfully unaware? Rick's assistant looked surprised to see her. Mrs. Davidson. Mr. Davidson is in a meeting, but I'm sure he'd love to see you. Oh, he'll definitely want to see me, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She pushed open the door to Rick's corner office without knocking. Her husband looked up from his conference table where he sat with 3 other executives, his expression shifting from annoyance to confusion to something approaching fear as he took in her appearance. Sarah, what are you doing here? Is everything okay with the baby? Everyone out, Sarah said firmly to the other men in the room. Now! Rick nodded to his colleagues, who quickly gathered their papers and left, closing the door behind them. The moment they were alone, Sarah held up his phone. You forgot this at the doctor's office, she said, her voice dangerously calm. Isabella, business has been texting you about your son and the twins she's carrying. The color drained from Rick's face. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, dark clouds gathered over Manhattan, and the first drops of rain began to streak the glass. The visual of her tears would later blur, with the rain pelting against those windows in Sarah's memory. Sarah, I can explain. Explain what that my husband of 18 years has been living a double life. That while I've been home carrying your child, you've been playing house with another woman and her son. Sarah's voice rose with each word. Rick stood slowly, his hands raised as if approaching a wounded animal. It's not what you think. Isabella works here. She's my assistant. Yes, we had a brief relationship, but it ended years ago. The boy, Jamie, I'm just helping financially. It doesn't mean anything. Just helping financially? Sarah laughed bitterly. These messages talk about family, Rick, about you being daddy, about coming home to them. The pregnant wife betrayed by the man she'd sacrificed everything for felt her world tilting on its axis. She'd given up her successful marketing career when Madison was born, devoted herself to creating the perfect home and family life Rick claimed to want. She'd been the supportive wife at every business dinner, every charity gala, every company retreat. How long, she whispered. Rick's silence was answer enough. How long? Rick. 4 years, he admitted quietly. But Sarah, you have to understand. 4 years. The words hit her like a physical blow. 4 years of lies. 4 years of deception. 4 years of feeling like she was losing her mind when she suspected something was wrong, but Rick convinced her she was being paranoid. Who is she? Sarah asked, though part of her already suspected the answer based on the name. Isabella Martinez. She started as my assistant after Jennifer left. She's smart, ambitious. It wasn't supposed to happen, but Isabella Martinez, Sarah repeated slowly. From college, my Isabella, from college. Rick's expression confirmed her worst fear. Isabella wasn't just any mistress. She was Sarah's former best friend from Northwestern University, the maid of honor at their wedding, the woman who had spent countless weekends at their home before mysteriously disappearing from their lives 4 years ago. The heartbreaking family drama was even worse than Sarah had imagined. Her best friend had deliberately taken a job with Rick, seduced her husband, and stolen her life. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that Sarah felt physically sick. You hired my best friend to work for you, Sarah said slowly. Then you had an affair with her. She had your child, and now she's pregnant again, while I'm standing here carrying what I thought was your only other child. Sarah, please. Does Madison know? The thought of her 16-year-old daughter being aware of her father's betrayal while Sarah remained ignorant added another layer of humiliation. Rick's guilty expression was answer enough. Sarah sank into one of the leather chairs facing Rick's desk, the fight temporarily leaving her body. The magnitude of the deception was overwhelming. Not only had Rick betrayed their marriage vows, but he'd done so with the one person Sarah had trusted implicitly. Isabella had been her confidant, the person she'd turned to during the rough patches in her marriage. How many conversations had they had about Rick's behavior, with Isabella offering comfort while secretly being the cause of Sarah's pain? I want you to listen to me very carefully, Sarah said, her voice steady with a calm that surprised them both. I want you to tell me exactly how this happened. I want you to tell me about every lie you've told me for the past 4 years. And then I want you to tell me what you plan to do about it. Rick moved to sit across from her, his expression a mixture of guilt and something else. Was it relief? Had he wanted to be caught? Isabella reached out to me about the assistant position after she saw the job posting online. I didn't even know she was looking to move to New York. At first, it was completely professional, but she was there every day, working late with me, understanding the pressure I was under, growing the company. And I wasn't understanding enough. Sarah's voice was sharp. It wasn't about you not being enough. You are an amazing wife and mother, But Isabella understood the business side of things. She had ideas, ambitions. She made me feel like the man I was before marriage and kids, when everything seemed possible. The millionaire husband cheating on his devoted wife painted a picture that Sarah had heard countless times in her friend Emma's divorce cases. The successful man who felt trapped by domesticity, who found excitement in a younger woman who made him feel powerful and desired. When did it become physical? About 6 months after she started working for me. We were on a business trip to Chicago, dealing with a major client crisis. We'd been working around the clock, and one night you decided to destroy our marriage, Sarah finished. It was supposed to be just that once. But Isabella, she understood me in ways that I thought I'd lost. She saw potential in me that I'd forgotten existed. Sarah felt a bitter laugh rise in her throat. She saw potential in your bank account. You mean, that's not fair. Isabella has her own career, her own ambitions. She's not some gold digger. She's pregnant with your second child while married to another woman. Rick, if that's not calculating, I don't know what is. They sat in silence for several minutes, the rain now beating steadily against the windows. Sarah watched the water streak down the glass and felt her tears beginning to fall in a similar pattern down her cheeks. What about Jamie? She asked finally. He's 3. He's a good kid. Smart. Funny. He looks like Madison did at that age. The casual way Rick spoke about this child, his son that Sarah had never met, never even known existed, cut deeper than anything else. This wasn't just an affair. This was an entire alternate life that Rick had been living while she played the devoted wife. Does he know about us, about Madison and the baby? He knows I have another family. Isabella's been honest with him about that. Honest. Sarah tasted the bitter irony of the word. At least someone in this situation values honesty. She stood abruptly, her hand instinctively going to her rounded belly. The baby kicked as if responding to her stress, and Sarah felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. Whatever happened between her and Rick, she would protect this child from the chaos he'd created. I need to go home, she said. I need to think. Sarah, wait. Rick stood as well, reaching into his desk drawer. He pulled out a manila envelope and held it out to her with shaking hands. What is this? Divorce papers, he said quietly. I had them drawn up last month. I was waiting until after the baby was born to discuss our options. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's premeditation, felt the final piece of her world crumble. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a mistake that had spiraled out of control. Rick had been planning to leave her, had been preparing for this conversation while she planned their baby's nursery and dreamed of their family's future. You've been planning this, she whispered. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought if I waited until after Lily was born. Lily? Sarah's voice was sharp. How do you know we're having a daughter? The ultrasound isn't until next week. Rick's face went pale. I misspoke. No, you didn't. You know because Isabella is having twins, and you've been comparing our pregnancies. You probably know more about my own pregnancy than I do, because you've been sharing every detail with her. The depth of the betrayal was staggering. Not only had Rick been living a double life, but he'd been sharing the most intimate details of Sarah's pregnancy with his mistress. Had they laughed about her morning sickness, compared ultrasound photos, made plans for how Rick would divide his time between his two families? I was going to wait until after the baby, Rick said quietly. I thought it would be easier on everyone. Easier? Sarah's voice rose to near shouting. You thought keeping me in the dark while you played house with my former best friend would be easier. You thought letting me plan our future while you planned to leave would be easier. She clutched the envelope of divorce papers, the weight of them seeming to represent the end of everything she'd built her adult life around. The millionaire marriage secrets exposed in one afternoon had not only destroyed her present, but retroactively poisoned every happy memory of the past 4 years. I need to go, she said again, moving toward the door. Sarah, please, we can work this out. We can find a way to make this work for everyone. She turned back to look at him one last time. The man she'd loved for 2 decades, the father of her children, the person she'd trusted with her heart and her future, was a stranger. The Rick she'd married would never have been capable of this level of deception and cruelty. There is no everyone, Rick. There's you, your pregnant mistress, and your secret son. And then there's me, Madison, and this baby. Those are two separate families now. You made that choice when you decided to build a life with Isabella while keeping me as your cover story. Sarah walked out of the office, past the assistant who pretended not to stare, past the executives who probably knew more about Rick's personal life than she did, and into the elevator that would carry her away from the life she'd thought she was living. As the elevator descended, Sarah felt her phone buzz with a text message. For a moment, her heart leaped with the irrational hope that it might be Rick, taking back everything he just said, begging for forgiveness, promising to fix their marriage. Instead, it was from a number she didn't recognize. Sarah, it's Isabella. We need to talk. There are things Rick hasn't told you, things you deserve to know. Meet me at our old coffee shop near campus tomorrow at 2 p.m. Come alone. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, and Sarah stepped out into a world that looked exactly the same as it had 3 hours ago, but felt completely foreign. The pregnant wife, betrayed by everyone she'd trusted now, faced a choice that would determine not just her future, but the future of the child she carried and the daughter waiting for her at home. As she walked through the revolving door onto the busy Manhattan street, Sarah realized that this was just the beginning. If Isabella wanted to talk, it meant there were more secrets, more lies, more heartbreak waiting to be discovered. But for the first time in 4 years of growing unease and self-doubt, Sarah felt a strange sense of clarity. She finally knew why her marriage had felt wrong. She finally understood why Rick had grown distant, why she'd felt like she was losing her mind, why her instincts had been screaming that something was terribly amiss. The truth was devastating, but it was still the truth. And armed with that truth, Sarah Davidson was about to discover just how strong a betrayed woman could become. The drive from Manhattan to the Hamptons had never felt so long. Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel as she navigated the familiar route that had always represented coming home to safety and comfort. Now, as she approached the grand iron gates of their $8 million estate, every detail looked different through the lens of betrayal. The manicured gardens that she'd spent hours perfecting with their landscaper, the tennis court where Rick claimed to relax on weekends but probably spent calling Isabella, the pool house where they'd hosted countless parties with friends who likely knew about Rick's double life. Everything felt contaminated by lies. Sarah pulled into the circular driveway and sat in her Mercedes for several minutes, staring at the house that had been her pride and joy. The colonial architecture, the perfectly symmetrical windows, the wraparound porch where she'd imagined growing old with Rick. It all felt like a movie set now, beautiful but hollow. Her phone had been buzzing with calls from Rick throughout the drive, but she'd ignored everyone. She needed space to think, to process, to figure out how to move forward. More importantly, she needed to talk to Madison before her daughter heard about this situation from someone else. Inside the house, Sarah was struck by the silence. Madison was at school. Their housekeeper had Wednesdays off, and the space felt cavernous and empty. She walked through the marble foyer, past the family photos that now seemed to mock her, and into the kitchen where she'd prepared thousands of meals for a family that had been fractured without her knowledge. Sarah poured herself a glass of water and sat at the island where she and Rick used to plan their days over morning coffee. The luxury divorce due to mistress scenarios that her friend Emma handled in her law practice had always seemed like distant dramas happening to other people. Now Sarah was living one of those stories, and the reality was far more devastating than she'd ever imagined. She pulled out her phone and dialed Emma Collins, the only person she trusted completely in this moment of crisis. Sarah, how did the doctor's appointment go? Everything okay with the baby? The concern in Emma's voice nearly broke Sarah's composure. Her friend had no idea that Sarah's world had imploded in the space of a single afternoon. Emma, I need you to come over. Right now. Something's happened. What's wrong? Are you hurt? Is it the baby? I'm physically fine. But Emma, Rick's been having an affair for 4 years with Isabella Martinez from college. She has his son, and she's pregnant with twins. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. I'm leaving the office now, Emma said finally. Don't do anything. Don't sign anything. Don't talk to anyone until I get there. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Sarah ended the call and found herself drawn to the family photos lining the hallway. There was their wedding photo, Rick looking handsome in his tuxedo, Sarah radiant in her designer gown, Isabella beaming beside her as maid of honor. How could Sarah have missed the way Isabella looked at Rick in that photo? Or had the seeds of betrayal been planted even then? She continued down the hall to Madison's school photos, Rick's corporate headshots, family vacation pictures from Martha's Vineyard in Aspen. In every image, they looked like the perfect American family. Wealthy, attractive, successful. The millionaire husband cheating scandal was about to destroy not just their marriage, but the entire carefully constructed image they'd built over 18 years. Sarah climbed the stairs to their master suite, each step feeling heavier than the last. The bedroom that had been their private sanctuary now felt like a crime scene. How many times had Rick made love to her after spending time with Isabella? How many nights had he lain beside her, planning his escape while she dreamed of their future together? She walked into her massive walk-in closet, surrounded by designer clothes and shoes that represented years of playing the perfect wife. Chanel suits for charity galas, evening gowns for corporate functions, casual wear for country club events, all costumes in a performance that had been meaningless because the other lead actor had been playing an entirely different role. The weight of the betrayal hit her all at once, and Sarah collapsed onto the velvet bench in the center of the closet. Surrounded by the material symbols of her former life, she finally allowed herself to break down completely. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside her. 18 years of love and trust and sacrifice pouring out in a torrent of grief. This was her first peak moment of despair, sitting among designer clothes that now felt like costumes for a lie, pregnant and alone, realizing that everything she'd built her identity around had been an illusion. The pregnant wife, betrayed by the man she'd devoted her life to, faced the reality that she didn't even know who she was without Rick and their marriage. The sound of the front door opening pulled Sarah from her breakdown. She wiped her eyes and made her way downstairs, where Emma was already setting up her laptop at the kitchen table. All business despite the concern etched on her face. "Okay," Emma said without preamble. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning and don't leave out any details." Sarah recounted the afternoon's revelations while Emma took notes, occasionally asking sharp questions that Sarah hadn't even thought to consider. Her friend's legal training was evident in how she approached the situation. Emotions aside, what were the facts? What could be proven? What were Sarah's rights and options? "The first thing we need to do is secure your financial position," Emma said. "If Rick's been planning this for months, he's likely been moving assets around. We need to get a complete picture of your marital estate before he can hide anything else." "I don't even know where to begin with that. Rick handles all our finances." "That's about to change. I'm going to need you to gather every financial document you can find. Bank statements, investment accounts, business records, insurance policies, everything. We also need to secure your access to joint accounts before he can freeze you out." As if on cue, Sarah's phone buzzed with an alert from their bank. Her stomach dropped as she read the notification. "Emma, I just got an alert that our joint checking account has been restricted. Rick's already cut off my access." Emma's expression hardened. "That son of a bitch. Don't worry. We can get a court order to restore your access. But this tells us everything we need to know about how Rick plans to handle this divorce. He's not looking for an amicable split. He's been preparing for war." The front door slammed, and both women looked up to see Madison storming into the kitchen, her backpack slung over her shoulder and her face flushed with anger. "Is it true?" their 16-year-old daughter demanded. "Is Dad really leaving us for his assistant and her kids?" Sarah's heart sank. Madison, how did you? Everyone at school is talking about it. Apparently, Dad's been seen around town with some woman and a little boy for months. The whole country club knows. Everyone knows except apparently me and you. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's public humiliation felt a new wave of devastation. Not only had Rick been living a double life, but he'd been careless enough that their elite social circle had noticed. Sarah had been the only one living in ignorance, while their friends and neighbors whispered about Rick's affair. "Sweetheart, sit down. We need to talk about this." "I don't want to talk." Madison's voice cracked with emotion. "I want to know why Dad chose some other woman over our family. I want to know why he's been lying to us for years. And I want to know why you didn't figure it out sooner." The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her own daughter was blaming her for not preventing Rick's betrayal, for not being smart enough or observant enough to protect their family. "Madison, this is not your mother's fault," Emma said firmly. "Your father made choices that hurt this family. That's on him, not on anyone else. But Mom's supposed to be smart. She's supposed to know these things. How could she not know that Dad had a whole other family?" Sarah watched her daughter struggle with the same questions that had been torturing her all afternoon. How could the people closest to Rick not have seen the signs? What did that say about their intelligence, their worth, their ability to trust their own instincts? "I should have known," Sarah admitted quietly. "There were signs, but Dad explained them away, and I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe in our family." "Well, believing in Dad was stupid," Madison said harshly. "And now what happens to us? Do we have to change schools? What about the baby?" Emma stepped in before Sarah could respond. "Right now, nothing changes immediately. This is still your home. You're still going to the same school, and your mom is still going to have your baby sister. We're going to make sure you're protected through all of this." "Baby sister?" Madison looked confused. "How do you know it's a girl?" Sarah realized that Rick's slip earlier had revealed information they weren't supposed to have yet. "We don't know for certain. That was just something Dad said." But Madison was too smart to let it go. "Dad knows something we don't, doesn't he? He's been comparing notes with his girlfriend about their babies." The teenager's insight was devastating in its accuracy. Rick had indeed been living parallel lives, comparing pregnancies, making plans that included Isabella but excluded Sarah and Madison from his future. "I hate him," Madison said quietly. "I hate him for doing this to us, and I hate him for making Mom cry, and I hate him for choosing them over us." Sarah pulled her daughter into a hug, both of them crying for the family they'd lost, the father and husband who had betrayed them both. The heartbreaking family drama was just beginning, and they were all going to have to find ways to survive it. Emma's phone rang, interrupting the moment. She answered with her professional voice, but her expression grew increasingly grim as she listened. "That was my investigator," she said after hanging up. "I asked him to do some preliminary research on your financial situation. Sarah, I need you to sit down." "What is it?" "Rick moved $12 million to offshore accounts over the past 6 months. He's also taken out a significant loan against your house and cashed out several investment accounts. The money trail leads to shell companies, but it's clear he's been systematically hiding assets in preparation for this divorce." Sarah felt the room spin around her. $12 million was a significant portion of their wealth, money that should have secured Madison's college education and Sarah's future as a single mother. "Can we get it back?" "We can try, but offshore accounts are tricky. The fact that he moved money before filing for divorce gives us grounds to argue fraud, but it's going to be a long, expensive fight." Madison looked between the two women. "Are we going to be poor?" "You're not going to be poor, sweetheart," Emma assured her, "but your lifestyle is going to change significantly. Your dad has made sure of that." The millionaire husband cheating scandal had just become a financial betrayal that threatened to destroy not just Sarah's heart, but her ability to provide for her children. The man she trusted with her life had systematically dismantled their security while she planned baby nurseries and family vacations. As if the afternoon couldn't get any worse. The doorbell rang. Sarah looked at Emma in confusion. They weren't expecting anyone, and the gate should have stopped any uninvited visitors. "I'll get it," Emma said. But before she could reach the front door, they heard the sound of a key in the lock. "Only Rick has a key," Sarah whispered. But it wasn't Rick who walked into their kitchen. It was Isabella Martinez, looking exactly as beautiful as she had in college, but with the confidence of a woman who had gotten everything she wanted. She was visibly pregnant, probably around 5 months, and she was holding the hand of a little boy with Rick's unmistakable green eyes. "Hello, Sarah," Isabella said calmly. "I think it's time we had that conversation." The marble foyer of Sarah's home had hosted countless gatherings over the years: charity committee meetings, book club discussions, dinner parties with Rick's business associates. But it had never been the setting for a confrontation quite like this one. Isabella Martinez stood in the entryway as if she belonged there, her designer maternity dress and expensive handbags suggesting that Rick's financial support had been more than generous. The 3-year-old boy beside her, Jamie, looked around the grand space with wide eyes, taking in the crystal chandelier and sweeping staircase. "You have a beautiful home," Isabella said conversationally, as if she were a welcome guest rather than the woman who had destroyed Sarah's marriage. "Rick has told me so much about it," Sarah found her voice, though it came out shakier than she intended. "What are you doing here? How did you get past the gate?" "Rick gave me the codes months ago, in case of emergencies." Isabella's smile was perfectly pleasant and utterly infuriating. "And I'd say this qualifies as an emergency. Wouldn't you?" Emma stepped forward, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "I'm Emma Collins, Sarah's attorney. You're trespassing on private property, and I'm asking you to leave immediately." "Actually, I think Sarah will want to hear what I have to say." Isabella's gaze remained fixed on Sarah, her expression unreadable, especially since Rick hasn't been entirely honest with either of us. Madison appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by the voices. Her face went pale when she saw the little boy who bore such a strong resemblance to her father. "Madison," Sarah called, "please go to your room." "Is that her?" Madison asked, ignoring her mother's request. "Is that Dad's girlfriend?" Isabella looked up at the teenager with what seemed like genuine sympathy. "You must be Madison. Rick talks about you all the time. He's very proud of you." "Don't talk to my daughter," Sarah said sharply. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's mistress felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. "You've done enough damage to this family." "Have I?" Isabella tilted her head, the gesture reminiscent of the college girl Sarah had once known and trusted. "Or have I simply been playing the same game Rick has been playing, just with different rules?" The wealth loss and infidelity was about to become even more complicated. Sarah realized Isabella wasn't here to gloat or to stake her claim on Rick. She was here for a different reason entirely. "What do you want?" Sarah asked. "I want the truth to come out. All of it." Isabella looked down at Jamie, who was still staring around the impressive foyer. "Jamie, sweetheart, why don't you sit on that pretty bench and play with your tablet while the grown-ups talk?" The little boy obediently settled onto the antique settee that Sarah had purchased at an auction in London. Seeing Rick's son in her home, surrounded by the life she'd built, was surreal and heartbreaking. "The truth about what?" Emma asked. Isabella's laugh had a bitter edge. "The truth about what Rick has been telling both of us? The truth about his finances? The truth about his plans for the future?" She paused, her hand resting on her rounded belly. "And the truth about these babies I'm carrying?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "What about the babies? DNA tests are fascinating things, aren't they? Especially when you're not sure who the father really is." A wheel. The best friend mistress luxury affair scandal was about to become even more twisted. Sarah sank onto the stairs, her pregnancy making it difficult to stand for long periods, especially under stress. "I don't understand," Sarah said. "Rick has been supporting me financially for 3 years, claiming Jamie is his son. He's been planning to leave you to start a family with me and our children. Isabella's composure was perfect, but there was something dangerous in her eyes. The problem is, Rick and I haven't been exclusive any more than he and you have been faithful to each other. Emma stepped closer. What are you saying? I'm saying that Rick Davidson, pillar of the community and devoted family man, has been living not just a double life, but a triple life. Maybe more. Isabella's smile was sharp. And I'm not the only woman he's been supporting financially. The millionaire marriage secrets exposed were multiplying by the minute. Sarah felt dizzy as she tried to process what Isabella was implying. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. Rick works constantly. When would he have time for other relationships? Oh, Sarah, sweet, naive Sarah. Isabella's use of her old nickname from college stung. Rick has been building a network of women for years. Women who understand that wealthy men have needs that wives can't always fulfill. Madison had crept halfway down the stairs, clearly eavesdropping despite Sarah's request for her to leave. The heartbreaking family drama was exposing their teenage daughter to truths that would shatter her image of her father forever. You're lying, Madison said. My dad wouldn't do that. Isabella looked at the teenager with something approaching pity. Your father is a master manipulator, sweetheart. He makes each of us feel like we're special, like we're the only one who truly understands him. Why are you telling us this? Sarah asked. What do you gain from destroying Rick's reputation? Because Rick has been lying to me too. Isabella's mask of composure finally cracked, revealing genuine anger underneath. He promised to marry me after he divorced you. He promised that we'd raise our children together, that I'd be his partner in business and in life. She reached into her purse and pulled out a tablet, swiping to a series of text messages. But yesterday I found out that Rick has been making similar promises to at least two other women. One in Chicago, one in Miami. Both of them pregnant. Both of them convinced they're the love of his life. Sarah stared at the evidence Isabella held, her mind struggling to process the scope of Rick's deception. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband was learning that the betrayal was far worse than she'd imagined. This can't be real, Sarah said. Oh, it's real. And it gets better. Isabella swiped to another screen. Rick's been funding all of these relationships with money from his company, money that technically belongs to his shareholders, including his wife. Emma was taking notes furiously. Are you saying Rick has been embezzling company funds to support multiple mistresses? I'm saying Rick has been playing a very dangerous game, and it's about to catch up with him. Isabella looked directly at Sarah. The SEC is already investigating irregularities in his company's accounts. By this time next week, your husband is going to be facing federal charges. The luxury divorce due to mistress was about to become a criminal investigation that would destroy not just their marriage, but Rick's career and their family's reputation. Sarah felt like she was trapped in a nightmare that kept getting worse with each revelation. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Sarah asked. Why wait until now to tell me this? Because I thought I was winning, Isabella admitted. I thought Rick was choosing me over you, that I was getting the better deal. But when I realized I was just another mark in his con game, I decided it was time for all of us to know the truth. Jamie looked up from his tablet, seeming to sense the tension in the room. Mama, when is Daddy Rick coming to see us again? Isabella's expression softened as she looked at her son. I don't know, baby. Daddy Rick has been very busy with work. The interaction between Isabella and Jamie revealed another layer of the deception. This little boy had been told that Rick was his father, had been waiting for visits that probably came at Rick's convenience, had been living in the shadow of a man who saw him as nothing more than an obligation. Does Jamie know about Madison? Sarah asked quietly. He knows Daddy Rick has other children. Rick has been very careful to keep his family separate, to make sure none of us got too curious about the others. Madison finally spoke up from her position on the stairs. How long have you known about us? Isabella looked at the teenager with something approaching respect. I've known about your family since before I applied for the job with your father. I researched him thoroughly before I decided to pursue him. You researched him? Sarah felt her blood run cold. This was planned. Sarah, you always were too trusting. Isabella's college nickname for her now sounded patronizing rather than affectionate. Did you really think it was a coincidence that your old college roommate happened to apply for a job with your husband? That she happened to be exactly his type? That she happened to be available for all those late nights and business trips? The best friend mistress luxury affair had been a carefully orchestrated seduction from the very beginning. Sarah realized that she'd been targeted, that her marriage had been deliberately destroyed by someone she loved and trusted. Why? Sarah whispered. Why would you do this to me? Isabella's expression hardened. Because you had everything I wanted. The perfect husband, the perfect house, the perfect life. You took it all for granted while I worked for everything I had. I trusted you. You were my maid of honor. You were supposed to be my friend. I was your friend in college, when we were equals. But after graduation, you married money while I had to work for mine. You got to play the pampered wife while I built my career from nothing. The millionaire husband cheating scandal was rooted in jealousy and resentment that had been festering for over 2 decades. Sarah realized that Isabella had been planning this revenge for years, waiting for the right opportunity to destroy the life she coveted. So you seduced my husband to get back at me for having a privileged life. I seduced your husband because he was seducible, because he was bored with his perfect wife and his perfect life, because he wanted excitement and passion, things you'd stopped providing years ago. The accusation hit Sarah like a physical blow. Even in her confession, Isabella was blaming Sarah for Rick's infidelity, suggesting that Sarah had somehow failed as a wife and driven Rick into another woman's arms. Emma stepped forward again. This is enough. Isabella, I need you to leave now. If you have evidence of Rick's financial crimes, you can turn it over to the authorities, but you've done enough damage to this family. Actually, I'm not done yet. Isabella reached into her purse again and pulled out a small recording device. I have hours of conversations with Rick where he discusses his plans for your assets. Sarah, plans that go far beyond simple divorce proceedings. She pressed play, and Rick's voice filled the marble foyer. Sarah has no idea how much debt I've taken on to fund the Chicago apartment and the Miami condo. By the time she figures out what's happening, the house will be mortgaged to the limit, and most of our liquid assets will be safely offshore. Isabella's voice responded. What about Madison's college fund? That's been liquidated for months. Sarah never checks those accounts. She leaves all the financial planning to me. Sarah felt her world tilt on its axis. Not only had Rick been stealing from their marriage, but he'd been stealing from their daughter's future. Madison's college education, the financial security Sarah thought they'd built together, the safety net she'd counted on as a single mother, all of it was gone. There's more, Isabella said, fast-forwarding the recording. Rick's voice continued. The beauty of it is that Sarah signed all the financial documents I put in front of her over the years. Legally, she's as responsible for the debt as I am. When this all comes out, she'll be left with nothing while I start fresh. The recording clicked off, and the foyer fell silent except for the sound of Sarah's ragged breathing. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband had just learned that the betrayal included a deliberate plan to leave her financially destroyed and legally vulnerable. Why are you showing me this? Sarah asked. Because Rick screwed me over too, and I want him to pay for it. But more than that, I want you to understand what kind of man you've been married to all these years. Isabella looked around the beautiful foyer one more time, taking in the artwork and antiques that would probably have to be sold to pay Rick's debts. Enjoy your house while you can. Sarah, according to Rick's plan, you'll be losing it soon. With that, Isabella took Jamie's hand and walked back toward the front door, leaving Sarah, Emma, and Madison sitting in the stunned silence amid the wreckage of everything they thought they knew about their lives. But before Isabella could reach the door, it opened from the outside. Rick walked in, stopping short when he saw the group assembled in his foyer. What the hell is going on here? He demanded. Isabella smiled sweetly. Hello, darling. I was just having a conversation with your wife about our future together. Or should I say, our lack of a future together. Rick's face went white as he realized that his carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling all at once. The millionaire marriage secrets exposed in his own home, with his pregnant wife, his daughter, and his soon-to-be ex-mistress all staring at him with expressions ranging from heartbreak to fury. "Sarah, I can explain," he began. "No," Sarah said, standing up with more strength than she'd felt all day. "You can't explain this, Rick. You can't explain away 4 years of lies, multiple affairs, embezzlement, and a deliberate plan to financially destroy your own family." She turned to Emma. "I want him out of this house. Now. And I want to file every criminal and civil action we can against him." Emma nodded grimly. "Already on it." Rick looked between the women, seeming to realize that his game was over. The luxury divorce due to mistress had become a criminal investigation that would likely land him in prison. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is," Sarah replied. "It's very much over." As Rick retreated to pack a bag, Isabella lingered in the doorway. "Sarah," she said quietly, "for what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. Rick convinced all of us that we were special to him. We were all just marks in his con game." "That doesn't excuse what you did to me," Sarah replied. "No, it doesn't. But maybe we can both learn from this experience." With that, Isabella and Jamie left, leaving Sarah to begin picking up the pieces of her shattered life. The pregnant wife, betrayed by everyone she trusted now, faced the challenge of rebuilding from nothing, protecting her daughters, and finding a way to survive the financial and emotional devastation Rick had left in his wake. But for the first time since discovering the affair, Sarah felt something other than despair. She felt angry, and anger, she was beginning to realize, might be exactly what she needed to fight back. The emergency room at Lenox Hill Hospital buzzed with controlled chaos as Sarah was rushed through the automatic doors on a stretcher. The confrontation with Isabella and Rick had triggered early contractions, and what had started as emotional distress had quickly become a medical emergency, threatening both Sarah and her unborn daughter. "Ma'am, try to stay calm," the paramedic said as they wheeled her toward triage. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high, but we're going to take good care of you." Emma held Sarah's hand as they moved through the corridor, her face grim with worry. Madison had been left at home with Emma's teenage son, spared the additional trauma of seeing her mother in medical crisis. "Is the baby going to be okay?" Sarah managed to ask between contractions. "The doctors are going to do everything they can," Emma replied, though Sarah could hear the concern in her voice. As they reached the labor and delivery unit, Sarah caught sight of a familiar figure in the waiting area. Isabella sat in one of the chairs, still holding Jamie's hand, her own face pale with what looked like genuine worry. "Why is she here?" Sarah gasped. "I called Rick when the ambulance came," Emma explained. "She must have come with him." The heartbreaking family drama was playing out in the sterile environment of a hospital, where Sarah's moment of greatest vulnerability was being witnessed by the woman who had helped orchestrate her downfall. Dr. Martinez, Sarah's obstetrician and, ironically, no relation to Isabella despite sharing a surname, took charge as soon as they reached the delivery room. "Sarah, we need to get these contractions under control. You're only 32 weeks along, which means we need to do everything possible to keep this baby inside for at least a few more weeks." "But she's going to be okay." Sarah's voice was tight with pain and fear. "We're going to do our best, but I need you to try to relax. The stress you're under is making everything worse." "Relax." Sarah almost laughed at the absurdity of the suggestion. Her marriage had imploded, her financial future was destroyed, her husband was facing criminal charges, and now her baby was in danger. Relaxation seemed like an impossible luxury. The next few hours passed in a blur of medical interventions. IVs were inserted, monitors were attached, and medications were administered to try to stop the early labor. Emma stayed by Sarah's side throughout, fielding phone calls from their lawyer and trying to coordinate the legal and financial crisis while Sarah focused on keeping her daughter safe. Around midnight, the contractions finally began to subside. Dr. Martinez checked the monitors and nodded with cautious optimism. I think we've got things under control for now. But Sarah, you're going to need complete bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. No stress, no drama, no complications. Doctor, I'm in the middle of a divorce from hell. Stress-free isn't really an option right now. Dr. Martinez's expression was sympathetic but firm. Then you need to find a way to make it an option. This level of stress could trigger premature labor again, and next time we might not be able to stop it. As the medical team began to settle Sarah for what would likely be an overnight stay for observation, Emma stepped into the hallway to take a call. Through the partially open door, Sarah could hear her friend's voice, sharp with legal precision. No, absolutely not. My client is not meeting with anyone tonight. She's in the hospital, and any communications need to go through me. A few minutes later, Emma returned with a grim expression. That was Rick's lawyer. Apparently, Rick wants to discuss a settlement. Tonight. While I'm in the hospital bed, Sarah felt a surge of anger that was almost energizing. What kind of monster discusses divorce terms while his wife is in premature labor? The kind who's realized he's about to face federal charges and wants to secure a deal before he's arrested? Emma pulled out her tablet and sat in the visitor's chair beside Sarah's bed. I've been in contact with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, based on the evidence Isabella provided, plus what my investigator has uncovered. Rick is looking at serious jail time for embezzlement and fraud. How serious? 10 to 15 years, potentially, which means he's desperate to make a deal with you before the government seizes all his assets. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's financial crimes, was in the bizarre position of having leverage in her divorce precisely because Rick had been so thoroughly criminal in his betrayal. What kind of deal is he proposing? He wants to give you the house and full custody of both girls in exchange for your agreement not to cooperate with the federal investigation. Sarah stared at her friend in disbelief. He wants me to help him avoid prison. Essentially, yes, he's hoping you'll take a settlement that protects his remaining assets and keeps him out of jail. What about the money he's already stolen Madison's college fund? Our retirement savings. Emma's expression was apologetic. Most of that is gone. Sarah, hidden in offshore accounts or already spent on his other women and their expenses. Even if we recover some of it through the criminal proceedings, it could take years. The scope of Rick's betrayal was still revealing itself in waves. Not only had he destroyed their marriage, but he'd systematically stolen their children's future and left Sarah to face single motherhood with massive debt and legal liability. A soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. Dr. Martinez peered in, followed by an unexpected visitor. Mrs. Davidson, someone is here to see you. She says it's urgent. Isabella stepped into the room, having shed her earlier composure for something that looked like genuine distress. Sarah, I know you don't want to see me, but there's something else you need to know. Something I just found out about Rick's business dealings. Emma stood protectively near Sarah's bed. Anything you have to say can be said through lawyers. This can't wait for lawyers, Isabella said urgently. Rick's company is being investigated by more than just the FBI. The IRS is involved, and so is the SEC. He hasn't just been stealing money, he's been running a Ponzi scheme using investor funds to pay for his personal expenses. Sarah felt her head spinning. A Ponzi scheme. The Chicago woman, the Miami woman, the others. They weren't just mistresses. Some of them were investors he was defrauding. He's been using new investment money to pay returns to earlier investors while siphoning off millions for his personal use. Emma was typing frantically on her tablet. How do you know this? Because I was helping him do it, Isabella admitted. I thought I was just managing his personal affairs, but I was actually helping him launder money and forge documents. When I realized what was really happening, I turned all my evidence over to the authorities. The best friend mistress luxury affair had been a cover for a massive financial fraud that would destroy not just Sarah's family, but potentially hundreds of investors who had trusted Rick with their money. This means the house Everything we own. It's all going to be seized, isn't it? Sarah asked. Emma nodded grimly. If Rick was using marital assets as collateral for his scheme, then yes, the government can seize everything to compensate his victims. Sarah closed her eyes, trying to process the magnitude of the disaster. Not only had Rick destroyed their marriage, but he'd potentially left her homeless and destitute while facing criminal liability as his unwitting accomplice. There's something else, Isabella said quietly. The reason I'm really here. She pulled out her phone and showed Sarah a text message thread. Rick has been trying to convince me to flee the country with him. He has fake passports prepared and money hidden in accounts in the Cayman Islands. He's planning to disappear before he can be arrested. When? Emma asked sharply. Tomorrow night. He's booked on a private flight to Grand Cayman, then connecting to a country with no extradition treaty. Sarah stared at the evidence of Rick's escape plan. The man who had been her husband for 18 years, the father of her children, was prepared to abandon them completely to save himself from the consequences of his crimes. Why are you telling me this? Sarah asked. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Because I have a son who believes Rick is his father. Because you have daughters who deserve better than to be abandoned by a criminal. And because we both deserve to see him face the consequences of what he's done to us. Emma was already on her phone, presumably calling the FBI to report Rick's planned flight. There's something else you should know, Isabella continued. The DNA tests on Jamie and the twins I'm carrying. Rick isn't their father. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. What? I've been lying about the paternity to secure his financial support. Jamie's real father is a married businessman in Chicago who won't acknowledge him. The twins. I'm honestly not sure who their father is. The revelation that Isabella had been running her own con game added another layer to the already complex web of deception. Everyone in Rick's orbit, it seemed, had been lying to everyone else. So Rick has been supporting a child who isn't his and planning to leave his actual daughters. Sarah felt a bitter laugh rising in her throat. Rick has been supporting several children who might not be his, while stealing from his actual family, Isabella corrected. He's not a victim in this. Sarah, he knew the DNA was questionable, but it gave him an excuse to spend money on women while claiming it was parental responsibility. Emma finished her phone call and turned back to them. The FBI is moving to arrest Rick tonight. They'll pick him up at whatever hotel he's staying at. He's not at a hotel, Isabella said. He's at the Miami apartment with woman number 3. I can give you the address. As Isabella provided the information that would lead to Rick's arrest, Sarah felt an unexpected kinship with the woman who had helped destroy her marriage. They had both been manipulated and used by a master con artist who had convinced them they were special while he systematically betrayed everyone who trusted him. Isabella, Sarah said quietly, what happens to Jamie now? If Rick isn't his father and he's about to be arrested, Isabella's composure finally cracked completely, tears streaming down her face. I don't know. I've built my whole life around Rick's support. Without that, I can't afford the apartment he set up for us. I can't afford Jamie's private school. I can't afford anything. The wealth loss and infidelity was affecting not just Sarah, but all the women Rick had deceived. His arrest would leave a trail of single mothers and abandoned children, all victims of his elaborate con game. The twins you're carrying, Sarah asked gently. Do you have any idea who the real father might be? One of 2 men, both married, both unwilling to take responsibility. I was hoping Rick would continue to believe they were his long enough for me to figure something else out. Emma looked between the 2 women with something approaching amazement. You realize you're both victims of the same con artist, that Rick manipulated both of you into believing you were in control when he was actually pulling all the strings? Sarah nodded slowly. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's elaborate fraud was beginning to understand that everyone in Rick's orbit had been betrayed in different ways. Isabella's methods had been reprehensible, but her motivations were rooted in the same desperation for security and love that had made Sarah so vulnerable to Rick's lies. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now we both figure out how to rebuild our lives without Rick's money or support, Isabella said. And we both hope that testifying against him will be enough to reduce whatever criminal liability we might face for unknowingly participating in his schemes. Emma was reviewing documents on her tablet. Based on the evidence Isabella has provided, I think we can make a strong case that you were both victims rather than co-conspirators. But it's going to be a long, complicated legal process. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Davidson, your husband is on the phone. He says it's urgent. Sarah looked at Emma, who nodded. Put him through, but keep it short. The stress isn't good for you or the baby. Rick's voice on the hospital phone sounded strained and desperate. Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm about to be arrested, but there are things I can do to protect you and the girls if you're willing to work with me. Protect us from what, Rick? From the financial ruin you've created, from the criminal charges we might face because of your fraud. I can make sure the house stays in your name, make sure Madison's college fund is restored, make sure you have enough money to raise the baby. But I need you to refuse to cooperate with the federal investigation. Sarah looked at Isabella, who was listening to every word. The woman who had helped destroy her marriage was now a fellow victim of Rick's con game, and they were both facing an uncertain future. Rick, Sarah said finally, the answer is no. I'm not going to help you escape the consequences of what you've done to us, to our children, and to all the other people you've defrauded. Sarah, please, I'm begging you. I can make this right if you just give me the chance. You can't make this right. Rick, you destroyed our marriage, stole our money, lied to our children, and committed crimes that hurt innocent people. The only thing you can do now is face the consequences. She hung up the phone and looked at Emma and Isabella, two women who represented the past and future of her life in very different ways. What happens to us now? She asked. Now we survive, Emma said simply. We figure out how to rebuild from nothing, how to protect our children, and how to make sure Rick faces justice for what he's done. Isabella nodded in agreement. And maybe we help each other through it. We're both going to need all the allies we can get. As dawn broke over Manhattan, Sarah lay in her hospital bed contemplating the wreckage of her life and the uncertain future ahead. The pregnant wife, betrayed by her husband's massive fraud, had lost everything she'd thought was secure. But she'd gained something unexpected, the knowledge that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined, and the determination to protect her children no matter what it cost her. The heartbreaking family drama was far from over, but for the first time since discovering Rick's betrayal, Sarah felt like she might actually survive it. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new Beverly Hills office, watching the California sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. The view from the 35th floor of the Century City Tower was breathtaking, a stark contrast to the sterile hospital room where she'd made the decision to fight back against Rick's betrayal. Baby Lily slept peacefully in her carrier beside Sarah's desk, her tiny features a perfect blend of her parents' genetics, but unmarked by the chaos that had preceded her birth. After 2 months of bed rest and a carefully managed delivery, Lily had arrived healthy and strong, a miracle considering the stress and trauma of Sarah's pregnancy. Mom, the Goldstein account presentation is ready for your review. Madison called from the reception area of Davidson Marketing Solutions. At 17, Madison had surprised everyone by choosing to spend her gap year before college, working with her mother instead of lounging at the country club, like most of her former friends. The midlife career comeback had been born out of necessity rather than choice. But Sarah had discovered that rebuilding her professional life was infinitely more satisfying than playing the perfect wife had ever been. When Rick's crimes had been exposed and their assets frozen, Sarah had been forced to start over with nothing but her marketing degree and the connections she'd maintained from her pre-marriage career. Emma knocked on the office door and entered with a stack of legal documents. The final divorce decree is ready for your signature, she said, settling into one of the leather chairs facing Sarah's desk. And I have news about Rick's sentencing. Sarah moved away from the window and sat behind her desk, careful not to disturb sleeping Lily. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, FBI interviews, asset recovery attempts, and the challenging process of starting a new business while caring for a newborn. What did he get? Sarah asked, though she'd already prepared herself for disappointment. White-collar criminals with good lawyers often received lighter sentences than their crimes warranted. 12 years in federal prison, plus full restitution to his victims, Emma replied. The judge was particularly harsh because of the number of families Rick destroyed and the deliberate way he targeted women who trusted him. Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that Rick would face consequences, sadness that Madison and Lily would grow up with their father in prison, and a strange sense of closure after months of legal uncertainty. What about the restitution? Will we actually see any of that money? Emma's expression was cautiously optimistic. The FBI recovered about 60% of the stolen funds from Rick's offshore accounts. Your share should be enough to secure college funds for both girls and give you some financial stability while you build the business. The female empowerment after millionaire marriage betrayal had been hard-won through months of testimony, depositions, and the painstaking process of untangling Rick's web of financial crimes. Sarah had testified before federal grand juries, provided evidence to multiple law enforcement agencies, and faced down Rick's attempts to manipulate her into protecting him. Madison appeared in the doorway with a tablet in her hands. Mom, we just got the final approval from the Goldstein Group. They want to sign a year-long contract for their complete digital marketing overhaul. Sarah felt a surge of pride and accomplishment. The Goldstein Group was a major Beverly Hills real estate firm, and landing their account would establish Davidson Marketing Solutions as a serious player in the competitive LA market. That's fantastic, sweetheart. How much is the contract worth? $2.5 million for the first year, with options for renewal, Madison said, only grinning. Mom, we did it. We're actually going to be okay. Emma raised an eyebrow. More than okay, I'd say. Sarah, you've built $1 million business in 6 months while raising a newborn and testifying against your criminal ex-husband. That's pretty extraordinary. The midlife career comeback story was exceeding even Sarah's most optimistic projections. The contacts she'd maintained from her pre-marriage career had been eager to work with her once word spread about her situation and her determination to rebuild. The story of the pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband who fought back and created her own success had become inspirational to many women in similar situations. Baby Lily stirred in her carrier, making the soft sounds that meant she was waking up hungry. Sarah lifted her daughter into her arms, marveling at how perfectly Lily fit against her shoulder, how completely innocent she was of the drama that had surrounded her birth. Any word from Isabella? Sarah asked as she settled Lily for feeding. Emma nodded. She's doing well, actually. The testimony she provided against Rick helped her avoid criminal charges, and she started a consulting business helping other women identify and escape financial fraud. The irony isn't lost on anyone. Isabella Martinez had surprised everyone by becoming a valuable ally in the fight against Rick. Her intimate knowledge of his schemes and her willingness to testify had been crucial in securing his conviction. More surprisingly, she and Sarah had developed a cautious friendship based on their shared experience of surviving Rick's manipulation. How are her boys doing? Sarah asked. Jamie's adjusting well to knowing the truth about his paternity. Isabella found his real father, and while the situation is complicated, at least Jamie knows where he comes from now. The twins are thriving. Apparently having an honest mother is better for them than having a criminal fake father. Madison settled into the chair next to Emma's, her expression growing serious. Mom, there's something I need to tell you about Dad. Sarah felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. Even 6 months after Rick's arrest, any mention of him triggered her protective instincts. What is it, sweetheart? He's been writing to me from prison, letters asking me to visit him, asking me to convince you to bring Lily to see him. The heartbreaking family drama continued even with Rick behind bars. Sarah had been dreading this conversation, knowing that eventually Madison would have to decide what kind of relationship, if any, she wanted with her father. How do you feel about that? Sarah asked carefully. Madison was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the Los Angeles skyline. I feel angry that he's asking me to choose sides. I feel sad that the dad I thought I knew never really existed. And I feel guilty that part of me still loves him, even though I know what he did to us. Emma leaned forward with the compassion that made her such an effective advocate for women in crisis. Those feelings are all completely normal. Madison, you don't have to decide anything right now about visiting him or maintaining contact. I know, but I also know that Lily is going to ask about him someday, and I want to be able to give her honest answers about who our father really was. Sarah felt a surge of pride at her daughter's maturity and wisdom. The 16-year-old who had blamed Sarah for not preventing Rick's betrayal had grown into a thoughtful 17-year-old who understood the complexity of their situation. "We'll figure it out together," Sarah promised. "Whatever you decide about Dad, I'll support you. And when Lily is old enough to ask questions, we'll make sure she knows the truth in age-appropriate ways." Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. "Speaking of supportive relationships, that's from David. He's confirming dinner plans for tonight." David Chen was the managing partner of a successful venture capital firm who had become Sarah's business mentor and, over the past 2 months, something more personal. Unlike Rick's dramatic, passionate pursuit, David's courtship had been steady, respectful, and based on genuine admiration for Sarah's strength and intelligence. "Are you going to introduce him to Lily soon?" Madison asked with a grin. Sarah blushed slightly. "Maybe. We're taking things very slowly. After everything with your father, I want to be absolutely sure about anyone I bring into our lives." The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's elaborate con game was approaching new relationships with hard-won wisdom about the difference between charm and character, between passion and genuine love. Emma gathered her legal documents and stood to leave. "I hate to break up this family bonding time, but I have another client meeting tonight. Sarah, you should feel incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. 6 months ago, you were in a hospital bed thinking your life was over. Now you're running a successful business, raising 2 amazing daughters, and building a new life on your own terms." After Emma left, Sarah and Madison worked together to close up the office for the day. The routine of shutting down computers, reviewing tomorrow's schedule, and preparing Lily's diaper bag for the drive home had become comfortingly familiar. "Mom," Madison said as they waited for the elevator, "I'm proud of you too. I know I was angry at you for a while after Dad's arrest, but I understand now that you were just as much a victim as I was." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more to me than you know. And I'm excited about starting USC in the fall. Knowing that my college is paid for with money you earned instead of money Dad stole makes it feel more meaningful." The elevator arrived, and they rode down to the parking garage in comfortable silence. Sarah's new BMW, purchased with her own earnings rather than Rick's stolen money, represented independence and self-sufficiency in a way that her previous luxury cars never had. As they drove through Beverly Hills toward their rented house in the hills above Sunset Boulevard, Sarah reflected on how much their lives had changed. The $8 million Hamptons estate was gone, seized by the government and sold to compensate Rick's victims. But the 4-bedroom house they rented in LA felt more like home than the mansion ever had. Probably because it represented security Sarah had earned rather than wealth that had been built on lies. "David's picking you up at 7, Madison asked as they pulled into their driveway. "Yes, but I can cancel if you'd rather have family time tonight." "Mom, go on your date. You deserve to have some fun with a man who isn't a sociopathic criminal." Sarah laughed at her daughter's blunt assessment. "When did you become so wise about relationships?" "When I watched you survive the worst betrayal imaginable and come out stronger. If my mom can rebuild her entire life after being destroyed by a con artist, I figure she can probably handle dating a nice venture capitalist." Inside their house, Sarah prepared for her evening with David while Madison took over baby duties with Lily. The simple pleasure of getting dressed for a date with a man who respected her intelligence and admired her strength felt revolutionary after years of being valued primarily as Rick's attractive wife. David arrived promptly at 7, carrying flowers for Sarah and a small gift for Lily. His easy interaction with Madison and his genuine interest in hearing about her college plans reinforced Sarah's growing belief that he was nothing like Rick. "How was your day?" David asked as they drove toward their dinner reservation at a quiet restaurant in Manhattan Beach. "Productive. We landed the Goldstein account, which puts us ahead of our revenue projections for the year." "That's fantastic. I told you that taking the risk of starting your own firm would pay off." David's belief in Sarah's business acumen had been crucial during the early months when she doubted her ability to succeed without Rick's financial support. Unlike Rick, who had patronized her career ambitions, David treated her as an equal partner in their conversations about business and investing. "I got some news about Rick today," Sarah said as they settled into their table overlooking the Pacific Ocean. "Good news or bad news?" "Complicated news. 12 years in prison, which feels like justice. But he's trying to maintain contact with Madison, which creates emotional complications for everyone." David nodded thoughtfully. "How are you handling that?" "I'm trying to support Madison in making her own decisions about her relationship with her father, while protecting Lily from the whole situation until she's old enough to understand it." "That sounds like a wise approach. You're giving Madison agency while protecting Lily's innocence." The difference between David's thoughtful response and Rick's manipulative reactions to family crises highlighted how much Sarah's standards had evolved. She was no longer impressed by grand gestures or passionate declarations. Instead, she valued consistency, honesty, and genuine respect. As they shared dinner and watched the sun set over the ocean, Sarah felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. The female empowerment after millionaire marriage betrayal had led her not just to financial independence, but to a clearer understanding of what she wanted from life and relationships. "Sarah," David said as they finished their meal, "I know we've been taking things slowly, and I respect that completely, but I want you to know that I'm falling in love with you, not just with your strength or your success, but with who you are as a person." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. After Rick's manipulation and betrayal, she'd wondered if she would ever be able to trust her own judgment about men again. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted, "but I need you to understand that I come with complications. 2 daughters, a criminal ex-husband, and probably some trust issues that will take time to fully resolve." "I understand all of that," David said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "And I'm here for all of it. The complications, the healing process, and hopefully the future we could build together." As they drove back toward Beverly Hills, Sarah felt a sense of possibility she hadn't experienced since before Rick's betrayal. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's crimes had not just survived, she had rebuilt her life into something better than what she'd lost. But as they pulled into her driveway, Sarah noticed a car she didn't recognize parked across the street. David noticed it too, his expression growing concerned. "That car has been following us since we left the restaurant," he said quietly. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Enjoying your new life. Don't get too comfortable. Rick's business partners are very unhappy about his cooperation with the FBI. They think his family should share his consequences." The midlife career comeback story was about to take another dark turn. Rick's criminal associates, it seemed, weren't content to let Sarah rebuild her life in peace. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's fraud was about to discover that some betrayals have consequences that extend far beyond divorce and prison sentences. "David," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I think we need to call the police." The federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles buzzed with media activity as Sarah walked up the marble steps flanked by Emma and a team of FBI agents. The custody hearing that should have been a private family matter had become a public spectacle due to Rick's high-profile criminal case and the salacious details of his multiple affairs. "Mrs. Davidson, how do you respond to your husband's claims that you're an unfit mother?" a reporter shouted from the crowd of journalists gathered on the courthouse steps. Sarah kept her eyes focused straight ahead, following Emma's advice to ignore the media circus. The millionaire husband cheating scandal had captured public attention in a way that made their private pain into entertainment for strangers. Inside the courthouse, The reality of their situation became even more stark. Rick sat at the defense table in his orange prison jumpsuit, flanked by two expensive lawyers who somehow still believed they could rehabilitate his image enough to win him custody of Madison and Lily. Your Honor, Rick's lead attorney began, my client may have made mistakes in his business dealings, but those mistakes don't negate his love for his daughters or his rights as their father. Sarah felt her blood pressure rising as she listened to the sanitized version of Rick's crimes. Mistakes in business dealings was a euphemistic way of describing a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme that had destroyed dozens of families and left Sarah and her daughters financially devastated. Emma stood to address the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Davidson didn't make mistakes. He committed deliberate crimes that included stealing his own children's college funds and leaving his pregnant wife destitute. The man who would steal from his own family's future cannot be trusted with those children's welfare. The luxury divorce asset division had become secondary to the more pressing issue of protecting Madison and Lily from a father who had already demonstrated that his children's well-being was less important to him than his own selfish desires. Rick's second attorney, a sharp-faced woman who specialized in defending white-collar criminals, approached the bench with a thick folder of documents. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Davidson has been alienating the children from their father, poisoning them against him while he's been unable to defend himself from prison. Sarah felt her heart sink as she recognized some of the documents. Screenshots of text messages between her and Madison, recordings of phone conversations, and what looked like surveillance photos of their daily activities. Where did you get these? Emma asked sharply. Mrs. Davidson's activities are not as private as she might believe, the attorney replied smugly. Our investigation shows a pattern of parental alienation that has damaged the children's relationship with their father. Judge Patricia Williams, a stern woman in her 60s who had presided over countless custody disputes, examined the evidence with a frown. Counselor, how did your client obtain recordings of private conversations and surveillance photographs while he's been incarcerated? Rick's lawyer hesitated, clearly not wanting to admit that Rick had hired private investigators to spy on his own family. Our client has been concerned about his children's welfare and took appropriate steps to monitor their situation. Appropriate steps? Emma's voice rose with indignation. Your Honor, this evidence was obtained through illegal surveillance of my client and her minor children. Mr. Davidson hired investigators to spy on his family from prison, violating their privacy and possibly breaking additional laws. Sarah felt sick as she realized the extent of Rick's continued manipulation. Even from prison, he was trying to control and intimidate her, gathering ammunition to use against her in their custody battle. But the worst was yet to come. Rick's attorney played an audio recording that made Sarah's blood run cold. Madison, your father loves you very much. Sarah's voice came through the courtroom speakers. But he's made choices that hurt our family, and you have every right to be angry about that. I hate him, Madison's voice replied. I hate him for what he did to you, and I hate him for stealing my college money, and I hate him for choosing his girlfriends over us. I know, sweetheart. I hate him too sometimes. The recording ended, and Rick's attorney looked pleased with herself. Your Honor, this clearly shows Mrs. Davidson encouraging the children to hate their father, undermining any possibility of maintaining a healthy relationship. Sarah felt tears of frustration burning her eyes. The private conversation with her daughter, a moment of honesty about their shared pain, had been twisted into evidence of her unfitness as a mother. Emma stood immediately. Your Honor, this recording was obtained illegally and represents a mother comforting her child after that child learned her father had stolen her college fund. Mrs. Davidson was providing emotional support, not encouraging alienation. Nevertheless, Rick's attorney continued, it demonstrates a pattern of behavior that has poisoned the children against their father. We also have evidence that Mrs. Davidson has been allowing her 17-year-old daughter to work in her business instead of focusing on her education, essentially using child labor to support her new lifestyle. Sarah wanted to scream that Madison had chosen to work with her. that her daughter found purpose and healing in helping rebuild their lives together. But in the sterile environment of the courtroom, their shared strength and resilience was being portrayed as exploitation and manipulation. Judge Williams looked between the two sides with obvious frustration. This case presents unusual circumstances. Given Mr. Davidson's criminal conviction and incarceration, however, the court's primary concern must be the best interests of the children. Rick's attorney sensed an opening. Exactly, Your Honor, which is why we're requesting that the children be placed in the custody of Mr. Davidson's parents while this matter is resolved. They can provide stability and maintain the children's relationship with their father's family. Sarah felt her world tilt on its axis. Rick's parents, who had initially supported her during the divorce, had apparently been turned against her by Rick's manipulation and their own inability to accept their son's crimes. Your Honor, Emma said urgently, Mr. Davidson's parents have had minimal contact with these children over the past year. Removing them from their mother's care would be traumatic and destabilizing. My clients are prepared to provide a stable, wealthy home environment. Rick's attorney continued. Unlike Mrs. Davidson, who has been forced to work long hours while caring for an infant, essentially neglecting both children's needs, the custody battles in millionaire affairs often came down to resources and perception rather than genuine concern for children's welfare. Rick's family had money and respectability, while Sarah had been forced to work and struggle to rebuild their lives after Rick's betrayal. Judge Williams called for a brief recess, leaving Sarah and Emma to huddle in the hallway while Rick's legal team looked smugly confident. This is insane, Sarah whispered. They're making me look like a bad mother because I had to work to support my children after their father stole all our money. I know, but family court can be unpredictable, Emma replied. Judges sometimes prioritize stability and resources over emotional bonds, especially when one parent has been convicted of crimes. What about Madison's testimony? She's 17. Doesn't her opinion matter? It should. But Rick's team is going to argue that you've brainwashed her against her father. They're going to claim that her wishes aren't her own, but the result of your manipulation. When court resumed, the proceedings took an even more devastating turn. Rick's attorney called Isabella Martinez as a witness. Sarah couldn't believe her eyes as her former friend took the stand. Isabella had been her ally in exposing Rick's crimes, had testified against him in federal court. What was she doing here, supporting his custody claim, Ms. Martinez? Rick's attorney began. You've had extensive contact with both Mr. and Mrs. Davidson over the past 2 years. In your opinion, which parent is better suited to raise these children? Isabella looked directly at Sarah with an expression of apologetic regret. I believe Rick loves his daughters deeply and wants what's best for them. Sarah has been so focused on revenge against Rick that she's lost sight of what the children actually need. Sarah felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Isabella was betraying her again, this time in a way that could cost her custody of her own children. Can you elaborate on that? The attorney prompted. Sarah has built her entire new identity around being Rick's victim. She's turned Madison into her ally in a war against Rick instead of helping her maintain a relationship with her father. She's using both children as weapons in her vendetta against their father. Emma was on her feet immediately. Objection. Your Honor, this witness has her own agenda and criminal history related to this case. Sustained, Judge Williams replied. The jury will disregard the characterization of Mrs. Davidson's motives, but the damage was done. Isabella's testimony, coming from someone who had supposedly been Sarah's ally, carried weight that would be difficult to overcome. Ms. Martinez, Rick's attorney continued, in your interactions with the children, how did they speak about their father? Madison has been taught to hate Rick for his mistakes. She doesn't understand that he was trying to provide for multiple families, that his crimes were motivated by love rather than greed. Sarah wanted to vomit. Isabella was rewriting history, portraying Rick's fraud and betrayal as misguided love rather than selfish criminality. And what about baby Lily? Lily deserves to know her father, But Sarah has been determined to erase Rick from her life completely. She's depriving that innocent baby of a relationship with her daddy because of her own anger. When Emma cross-examined Isabella, the truth began to emerge. Ms. Martinez, didn't you testify in federal court that Rick Davidson was a manipulative criminal who destroyed multiple families for his own benefit? I was angry then. I've had time to reflect and realize that Rick was doing his best in an impossible situation. An impossible situation he created by committing fraud and adultery. Rick made mistakes, but that doesn't mean he doesn't love his children. And isn't it true that you've recently received a significant financial settlement from the liquidation of Mr. Davidson's assets? Isabella's composure cracked slightly. I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying that you've been paid to change your testimony, to betray Mrs. Davidson just as you betrayed her during her marriage. Objection, Rick's attorney shouted. Sustained, Judge Williams ruled. Counselor, stick to facts rather than accusations. But Emma had made her point. Isabella's sudden change of heart was suspicious and likely motivated by financial incentives rather than genuine concern for the children. The hearing continued for 2 more grueling hours, with Rick's team painting Sarah as a vengeful ex-wife who was using her children as weapons while Emma fought to show that Sarah was a devoted mother trying to protect her daughters from a criminal father. Finally, Judge Williams called for closing arguments. Your Honor, Rick's attorney began, this case is about 2 little girls who deserve to maintain a relationship with their father despite his mistakes. Mrs. Davidson has systematically poisoned them against him, turning their natural love into hatred and resentment. The children need to be protected from their mother's vendetta. Emma's closing was passionate and personal. Your Honor, Sarah Davidson is not a vengeful ex-wife. She's a protective mother. When she discovered that her husband had been stealing from their children's college funds, when she learned that he'd been living a double life for years, when she realized that he'd put their entire family at financial and legal risk, she did what any good mother would do. She protected her children and helped them understand the truth about their situation. Mr. Davidson didn't make mistakes. He committed crimes. He didn't provide for multiple families out of love. He manipulated and defrauded multiple women for his own gratification. He didn't accidentally destroy his daughter's financial security. He deliberately stole from their future to fund his affairs. These children have been through enough trauma. They don't need to be removed from the loving, stable home their mother has created and placed with grandparents who are more concerned with protecting their son's reputation than acknowledging the harm he's caused. Judge Williams took a brief recess to consider her decision. Sarah sat in the hallway with Emma, Madison, and baby Lily, trying to prepare for the possibility that she might lose custody of her own children. Mom, Madison said quietly, if the judge gives custody to Grandma and Grandpa Davidson, I'm going to run away. I'm 17. I can make my own choices about where I live. Sweetheart, let's not panic yet. The judge heard Emma's arguments, and she saw through Isabella's lies. But what if she didn't? What if she thinks you really have been turning me against Dad? Sarah didn't have an answer. The legal system didn't always prioritize truth or justice, especially when wealthy defendants could afford expensive lawyers and manipulate the narrative. When court reconvened, Judge Williams looked tired and frustrated. This case presents difficult questions about balancing children's relationships with incarcerated parents against their need for stability and protection from ongoing trauma. She began. Sarah held her breath. However, the evidence shows that Mrs. Davidson has been the primary caregiver for both children throughout this crisis, that she has successfully rebuilt their financial security, and that the children are thriving in her care. Sarah felt a surge of hope. While Mr. Davidson's parents may be well-intentioned, removing the children from their mother's custody would constitute additional trauma for children who have already endured significant upheaval. Therefore, the court awards primary physical custody of both children to Mrs. Davidson, with supervised visitation rights for Mr. Davidson upon his release from prison. Sarah felt tears of relief streaming down her face as Emma squeezed her hand. They had won, but barely. The custody battles in Millionaire affairs had nearly cost Sarah everything. Despite Rick being a convicted criminal, as they left the courthouse, facing another gauntlet of reporters and cameras, Sarah realized that their legal victory was just the beginning. Rick would appeal, his family would continue to fight, and the media attention would make their private lives a public spectacle. But for now, she had her daughters. Madison hugged her tightly as they walked down the courthouse steps, and baby Lily slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of how close she'd come to being separated from her mother. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's crimes had survived another battle, but the war for their family's future was far from over. The DNA testing facility in West Hollywood looked more like a medical spa than a place where family secrets were revealed and lives were forever changed. Sarah sat in the waiting room with Emma and Madison, baby Lily sleeping peacefully in her carrier, while they waited for results that could potentially rewrite everything they thought they knew about Rick's other children. Dr. Patricia Kim emerged from the lab with a manila envelope that seemed to weigh far more than paper should. The geneticist's expression was carefully neutral, but Sarah could see the complexity of what she was about to reveal in the woman's eyes. "Mrs. Davidson, I have the results of the paternity test you requested," Dr. Kim said, settling into the chair across from Sarah's small group. "I should warn you that these findings are unexpected." Sarah felt her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. After everything she'd been through with Rick's betrayal and criminal conviction, she'd thought there were no more surprises left to uncover. She was wrong. "Let's start with Jamie Martinez." Dr. Kim began, opening the envelope and pulling out the first set of results. "The child Isabella claimed was your ex-husband's son," and Emma prompted when the silence stretched too long. "Richard Davidson is not Jamie's biological father. In fact, the genetic markers suggest that Jamie's biological father is likely of East Asian descent, which neither Mr. Davidson nor Miss Martinez are." Sarah felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that Rick hadn't actually fathered Isabella's child, confusion about why Isabella had maintained the lie for so long, and concern for little Jamie, who had grown up believing Rick was his daddy. "What about Isabella's twins?" Madison asked quietly. Dr. Kim pulled out another set of documents. "This is where it gets more complicated. The twins Isabella is carrying have two different biological fathers. The Millionaire DNA test scandal was revealing layers of deception that went far beyond what anyone had imagined." Sarah stared at the genetic evidence that proved Isabella had been living an even more complex lie than anyone had suspected. "Two different fathers?" Emma asked. "How is that possible?" "It's called heteropaternal superfecundation," Dr. Kim explained. "It occurs when a woman releases multiple eggs during ovulation and has relations with multiple partners within a short time frame. Each egg can be fertilized by sperm from a different man." Sarah felt dizzy trying to process the implications. Isabella hadn't just been lying about Jamie's paternity. She'd been conducting what amounted to a paternity fraud scheme involving multiple men and multiple pregnancies. "Do we know who the actual fathers are?" Emma asked. Dr. Kim consulted her notes. "Based on the DNA samples Miss Martinez provided for comparison, one twin's father appears to be David Chen, and the other's father is someone named Marcus Williams." Sarah felt her blood run cold. David Chen was her David, the venture capitalist she'd been dating, the man she'd begun to trust with her heart and her future. "That's impossible," Sarah whispered. "David has been with me for months. When would he have had time to—" She trailed off as the timeline began to make horrible sense. David had known Isabella before he'd met Sarah. He'd claimed their connection was purely professional, that he'd been considering investing in one of Rick's companies before the fraud was discovered. Madison looked between her mother and Emma with growing alarm. "Mom, what does this mean?" What it meant was that Sarah's judgment about men was apparently as flawed as ever. What it meant was that the man she'd been falling in love with had been lying to her just as thoroughly as Rick had. What it meant was that her ability to trust, to believe in people, to build a new life, was fundamentally broken. "I need to call David," Sarah said, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. "Sarah, wait." Emma cautioned, let's think about this strategically. If David has been lying about his relationship with Isabella, confronting him directly might not be the best approach. But Sarah was already dialing, her anger and betrayal overriding her common sense. The phone rang twice before David's familiar voice answered. Sarah, hi. I was just thinking about you. How did the DNA testing go? The casual way he asked about the results she now knew he'd been dreading made Sarah feel sick. Interesting results, David. It turns out Isabella's twins have two different fathers. One of them is Marcus Williams, and the other is David Chen. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds before David spoke again, his voice carefully controlled. Sarah, I think we need to have a conversation in person. Can I come over tonight? Oh, we're definitely going to have a conversation, Sarah replied coldly. But it's going to be at my lawyer's office, with witnesses present. She hung up and looked at Emma and Madison, both of whom were staring at her with expressions of concern and disbelief. I can't believe this is happening again, Sarah said quietly. I can't believe I was stupid enough to trust another man who was lying to me. Mom, you're not stupid, Madison said fiercely. These men are master manipulators. They're good at making people trust them. Emma was already making notes on her legal pad. Sarah, I need you to think back over your relationship with David. Were there any signs that he knew Isabella better than he claimed? Any inconsistencies in his story about how they met? Sarah forced herself to review the past few months of her relationship with David, looking for clues she'd missed. The way he'd sometimes seemed to know details about Rick's case that she hadn't shared with him. The times he'd been unavailable for dates, claiming business travel. The way he'd discouraged her from pursuing certain legal avenues against Rick, suggesting they focus on moving forward rather than seeking justice. He's been playing me, Sarah realized. Just like Rick did, he's been manipulating me from the beginning. The DNA test paternity fraud in wealthy families was revealing a web of deception that made Rick's crimes look simple by comparison. Sarah had been targeted not once, but twice, by men who saw her as a mark rather than a person worthy of love and respect. Doctor, Kim cleared her throat uncomfortably. Mrs. Davidson, there's one more result I need to share with you. Sarah looked up, wondering what else could possibly be revealed. What is it? We also tested baby Lily's DNA against the samples from Mr. Davidson's other alleged children, just to establish a genetic baseline for the family. Sarah felt a chill of premonition. And baby Lily is not Richard Davidson's biological daughter. The world seemed to stop spinning as Sarah processed what she'd just heard. Lily, her precious daughter. The one good thing to come out of her marriage to Rick wasn't even Rick's child. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. I was never with anyone else during my marriage. Dr. Kim's expression was sympathetic but professional. The genetic markers are very clear. Mrs. Davidson, Lily's biological father is someone else entirely. Madison grabbed her mother's hand. Mom, are you okay? Sarah couldn't answer. Her mind was reeling, trying to understand how this could be possible. She'd been faithful to Rick throughout their marriage, despite his betrayals. She'd never even considered being with another man until after she'd discovered his affair. Could there have been a mistake at the fertility clinic? Emma asked. Some kind of mix-up with genetic material. That's possible, Dr. Kim acknowledged. If Mrs. Davidson underwent any fertility treatments during her pregnancy, there could have been contamination or mislabeling of samples. Sarah suddenly remembered the fertility treatments she'd undergone after years of trying to get pregnant again after Madison. Rick had insisted on the most expensive, exclusive clinic in Manhattan, claiming he wanted the best possible care for their future child. The Riverside Fertility Center, Sarah said slowly. We went through IVF treatments there for almost a year before I got pregnant with Lily. Emma was already pulling out her phone. I'm calling my investigator. If there was malpractice or deliberate manipulation at that clinic, We need to find out immediately. As they drove home from the testing facility, Sarah felt like she was living in a nightmare that kept getting worse. Rick wasn't Lily's father. David had been lying to her and sleeping with Isabella. And somewhere out there was a man who was Lily's actual biological father. A man she might never be able to identify. "Mom," Madison said carefully as they pulled into their driveway, "what are you going to do about David?" "I'm going to find out the truth," Sarah replied. "All of it. And then I'm going to make sure he faces consequences for what he's done." Inside their house, Sarah settled Lily in her bouncer and tried to process the magnitude of what she'd learned. Her daughter, the child she'd given birth to, nursed, loved with every fiber of her being, was not genetically related to the man she thought was the father. But as she looked at Lily's perfect little face, Sarah realized that genetics didn't matter. This was her daughter in every way that counted. The DNA results didn't change her love or her commitment to protecting Lily from the chaos that surrounded her birth. Emma arrived an hour later with printouts from her investigators' preliminary research into the Riverside Fertility Center. "Sarah, you need to sit down for this," Emma said grimly. "What now?" "The Riverside Fertility Center has been under investigation by the State Medical Board for multiple violations. Apparently, there have been dozens of complaints about genetic material being mixed up, contaminated, or deliberately switched." Sarah felt her legs give out as she sank onto the couch. Deliberately switched. The clinic's founder, Dr. Jonathan Riverside, has been accused of using his own genetic material in place of patients' chosen donors. There are at least 40 children who were born from his clinic who are actually his biological children, though the parents don't know it. The paternity fraud in luxury affairs was part of a larger medical scandal that affected dozens of families. Sarah realized that Lily might be one of Dr. Riverside's biological children, conceived through medical malpractice rather than the legitimate IVF process she'd paid for. So Lily's biological father might be this Dr. Riverside. It's possible. We won't know for sure until we can get a DNA sample from him. But the genetic markers would be consistent with that scenario. Sarah's phone rang, interrupting their conversation. David's name appeared on the screen, and Sarah felt a surge of anger and betrayal. "Answer it," Emma advised. "But put it on speaker so I can hear everything he says." "Hello, David." "Sarah, please let me explain. I know how this must look, but there are things you don't understand about my relationship with Isabella." "Then explain them." "Isabella and I had a brief relationship about a year ago, before I met you. It ended when I realized she was manipulating me to get information about Rick's business dealings. I had no idea she was pregnant, and I certainly didn't know the child was mine." "So you're admitting that one of the twins is yours?" David was quiet for several seconds. "Yes, but Sarah, you have to believe me. I didn't know. Isabella never told me she was pregnant, never asked for support, never even contacted me after our relationship ended. Until when? Until last week, she showed up at my office with the DNA results, demanding money and threatening to expose our relationship to you if I didn't pay her." Sarah felt her anger growing. Even if David was telling the truth about not knowing about the pregnancy, he'd hidden the relationship from her, lied about how well he knew Isabella, and allowed Sarah to believe their romance was built on honesty. "So you've been paying her to keep quiet. I've been trying to figure out how to tell you the truth without destroying what we have together. What we have together is already destroyed. David, you lied to me about Isabella, just like Rick lied to me about her. You let me fall in love with you while you were keeping secrets that affected my life and my children's lives. Sarah, please, don't let Isabella destroy another relationship for you. She's been manipulating all of us. Me, you, Rick, probably others. She's a professional con artist who targets wealthy men and their families." Emma leaned toward the phone. "David, this is Emma Collins, Sarah's attorney. If Isabella has been blackmailing you, that's a criminal matter that needs to be reported to the police." "Emma, yes, I suppose it is blackmail, but I was more concerned about protecting Sarah from the truth than I was about my own legal situation. The truth, Sarah's voice was sharp with sarcasm. The truth is that you've been lying to me from the beginning of our relationship. The truth is that you've been paying off the woman who helped destroy my marriage to keep her quiet about your affair with her. It wasn't an affair, Sarah. We weren't together when I was with Isabella, but you were with Isabella while you were supposedly helping me rebuild my life after her betrayal. You were sleeping with the woman who destroyed my marriage while positioning yourself as my white knight. The conversation continued for another few minutes, but Sarah had heard enough. David's explanations, even if they were true, didn't change the fact that he'd lied to her about his connection to Isabella and had been paying her off instead of being honest with Sarah about their history. After she hung up, Sarah looked at Emma with exhaustion and defeat. "I can't do this anymore," she said quietly. "I can't keep having my life destroyed by men who lie to me. I can't keep being betrayed by people I trust." "Sarah, you've survived Rick's betrayal and built a successful business. You've protected your daughters and created a stable home for them. You're stronger than you realize. But I'm apparently terrible at judging character. Rick fooled me for 18 years. Isabella fooled me in college and again recently. And now David has been lying to me for months. What does that say about my ability to protect my children from people who want to hurt us?" Madison appeared in the doorway, having been listening to the conversation from the kitchen. "Mom, it says that you see the good in people, and you want to believe the best about them. That's not a weakness. That's what makes you a good person and a good mother." Emma nodded in agreement. "Madison's right. The problem isn't with your judgment, Sarah. The problem is that you've been targeted by sophisticated manipulators who make lying and deception look like love and support. So what do I do now? How do I protect Lily and Madison from people like this in the future?" "You do what you've been doing," Emma replied. "You focus on your children, your business, and your own healing. You trust carefully and verify everything. And you remember that your worth isn't determined by the men in your life. It's determined by the strength and love you show your daughters every day." As Sarah put Lily to bed that night, she looked at her daughter's perfect face and made a silent promise. It didn't matter who Lily's biological father was. Sarah was her mother in every way that counted, and she would protect this child from the chaos and deception that had characterized her own life. The DNA test scandal had revealed more betrayals and lies, but it had also clarified something important for Sarah. Her family wasn't defined by genetics or marriage certificates or the men who had manipulated and betrayed her. Her family was defined by the love between her and her daughters, and that love was stronger than any lie or deception. The Millionaire DNA test paternity fraud had shattered more illusions, but it had also freed Sarah from the last vestiges of her need for validation from men who didn't deserve her trust. She was done being a victim of other people's lies. From now on, she would write her own story. 2 years later, Sarah stood before a packed auditorium at the Los Angeles Convention Center, addressing an audience of 500 women at the National Conference on Financial Recovery After Divorce. The keynote speech she was about to deliver had been years in the making, born from the ashes of Rick's betrayal and refined through the hard-won wisdom of rebuilding her life from nothing. "Ladies, I want to start by asking you a question," Sarah began, her voice clear and confident as it carried through the sound system. "How many of you have been told that your financial security depends on someone else's decisions, that your worth is measured by your husband's success or your family's wealth?" Nearly every hand in the audience went up, and Sarah felt the familiar surge of connection with women who had experienced similar betrayals and setbacks. "I used to believe that too. For 18 years, I defined myself as Rick Davidson's wife, as Madison's mother, as the woman who created the perfect home and supported the perfect marriage. I thought my financial security was guaranteed because my husband was successful and wealthy." Sarah clicked to the first slide of her presentation, showing a photo of the $8 million Hampton estate she'd once called home. "Then one day, I discovered that the man I'd trusted with my life had been systematically stealing from our marriage, our children's future, and our family's security to fund multiple affairs in a massive fraud scheme. In the space of a single afternoon, I went from being a millionaire's wife to being a single mother facing financial ruin. The financial recovery after millionaire betrayal had become Sarah's expertise, not by choice, but by necessity. In the 2 years since Rick's conviction and her divorce, she had not only rebuilt her personal finances, but had created a business empire that exceeded anything she and Rick had achieved together. Davidson Financial Recovery Services now employed 43 people across offices in Los Angeles, New York, and Miami. The company specialized in helping women navigate the complex financial aftermath of divorce, particularly cases involving fraud, hidden assets, and economic abuse. The first thing I learned, Sarah continued, is that wealth loss in infidelity cases is rarely just about money. It's about power, control, and the systematic erosion of a woman's independence. My ex-husband didn't just steal our money, he stole my confidence in my own judgment, my ability to trust, and my belief that I could survive without him. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. Sarah could see recognition in many faces. Women who had lived through similar betrayals and were searching for hope that recovery was possible. But here's what I want you to understand. Your financial recovery after betrayal isn't just about rebuilding your bank account. It's about reclaiming your power, your independence, and your right to define your own worth. Madison, now a 19-year-old sophomore at USC, watched from the front row with obvious pride. Beside her, 3-year-old Lily played quietly with her tablet, unaware that her mother was sharing their story with hundreds of strangers. Today, Davidson Financial Recovery Services manages over $50 million in recovered assets for women who were told they had no recourse against their abusive ex-husbands. We've helped over 300 women navigate complex divorce proceedings, asset recovery, and financial planning for their new lives. Sarah clicked to her final slide, showing a graph of the company's growth and success stories. But the most important recovery isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the moment when you realize that you don't need anyone else's permission to be successful, wealthy, and happy. It's measured in the strength you find when you're forced to rebuild from nothing and discover that you're capable of so much more than you ever imagined. The standing ovation that followed lasted for several minutes. As Sarah left the stage, she was surrounded by women wanting to share their stories, ask for advice, and express gratitude for the hope her presentation had given them. Later that evening, Sarah sat in her Malibu beach house, purchased with her own earnings and decorated to her own taste rather than to impress corporate clients, reviewing the day's success with Emma and Madison. "Mom, that was incredible," Madison said, curled up on the white sectional sofa with Lily sleeping against her shoulder. "You've helped so many women realize they can survive what you survived." Emma, now a partner in Sarah's business as well as her best friend, raised a glass of wine and a toast to Sarah Davidson, who turned her worst betrayal into her greatest triumph. "To women who refuse to stay victims," Sarah replied, clinking glasses with her friend. The family healing after affair scandal had taken 2 years of therapy, hard work, and honest conversations. Madison had eventually chosen to have limited contact with Rick during his incarceration, more out of curiosity than affection. She'd needed to understand who her father really was before she could fully move on from his betrayal. Lily, now 3, knew Rick only as Madison's father who lives far away. Sarah had decided to wait until Lily was older to explain the complex circumstances of her birth and Rick's crimes. For now, it was enough that Lily felt loved and secure. "Speaking of recovery," Emma said carefully, "I have some news about Isabella." Sarah tensed slightly. Even 2 years later, mentions of Isabella Martinez could trigger anxiety and anger. "What about her? She's been arrested again, this time in Phoenix, running the same paternity fraud scheme on a group of wealthy real estate developers." Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Isabella had clearly learned nothing from her previous experience and was continuing to destroy families for financial gain. "What about her boys Jamie and the twins? Jamie is with his biological father's family in Chicago. Apparently, once the DNA results came out, his real father stepped up and took responsibility. The twins are in foster care, while the authorities try to locate their fathers. The thought of those children suffering because of their mother's crimes made Sarah's heart ache. Whatever Isabella had done, her children were innocent victims of her manipulations. I've been thinking, Sarah said slowly, about starting a foundation to help children affected by parental fraud cases. Kids like Jamie and the twins, who get caught in the crossfire when their parents' lies are exposed. Madison looked up from where she was gently rocking Lily. That's a beautiful idea. Mom, you could call it the Lily Foundation, in honor of how you protected your own daughter from all the chaos. Sarah smiled at her eldest daughter's suggestion. The Lily Foundation would be a fitting tribute to the journey they'd all taken from betrayal to recovery. What would you think about expanding the business to include family counseling and child advocacy? Sarah asked Emma. I think it's a natural evolution of what we're already doing. We're already helping families navigate the aftermath of financial fraud. Adding services for the children affected by these crimes makes perfect sense. As they continued planning, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, she felt the familiar spike of anxiety that unknown contacts had triggered since Rick's betrayal. The message read, Mrs. Davidson, this is Dr. Jonathan Riverside. I believe we need to discuss your daughter Lily's parentage. There are things you deserve to know about the circumstances of her conception. Sarah's blood ran cold as she read the message. Dr. Riverside was the fertility clinic doctor who had been accused of using his own genetic material in place of chosen donors. The man who might be Lily's biological father was reaching out to her after 2 years of silence. Emma, Sarah said quietly, showing her friend the message. What do you think this means? Emma read the text with growing concern. It could mean several things. Maybe he wants to come clean about what happened at his clinic. Maybe he's facing additional legal action and wants to make amends. Or maybe he wants to claim parental rights to Lily. Sarah finished the thought that terrified her most. Madison looked between her mother and Emma with alarm. Mom, he can't do that. Can he? You're Lily's mother. You've raised her since birth. Legally, it's complicated, Emma said carefully. If Dr. Riverside can prove he's Lily's biological father and that Sarah consented to the procedure that led to Lily's conception, he might have grounds to seek visitation or even partial custody. Sarah felt her carefully rebuilt world threatening to crumble again. Just when she'd achieved financial success, emotional healing, and stability for her family, a new threat was emerging that could destroy everything she'd worked to protect. What do I do? Sarah asked. First, don't respond to that message tonight, Emma advised. Let me research Dr. Riverside's current legal situation and see what he might be trying to accomplish by contacting you. And second, remember that you've survived worse betrayals than this. Whatever Dr. Riverside wants, whatever legal challenges he might present, you're not the same woman who was destroyed by Rick's lies. You're stronger now, smarter, and you have resources and allies. Sarah looked at her sleeping daughter, her heart filled with fierce protectiveness. Lily was hers in every way that mattered. She'd carried her for 9 months, given birth to her, nursed her through every illness, celebrated every milestone. No man who contributed genetic material through medical fraud could claim to be more of a parent than that. You know what? Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with determination. Let him try. I built a multi-million-dollar business, survived a criminal husband, exposed a con artist, and created a stable, loving home for my daughters. If Dr. Riverside thinks he can intimidate me into giving up my child, he's about to learn that he picked the wrong woman to mess with. Emma smiled at her friend's renewed fighting spirit. That's the Sarah I know and love, the woman who turns every attack into an opportunity to get stronger. Madison nodded in agreement. Mom, whatever happens with this Dr. Riverside guy, we'll face it together. You, me, and Lily. We're a family, and families protect each other. As they settled in for the evening, Sarah felt grateful for the journey that had brought them to this point. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's fraud had become a successful businesswoman, devoted mother, and advocate for other women facing similar challenges. The wealth loss recovery had evolved into something much more valuable than money. It had become a recovery of self-worth, independence, and the unshakable knowledge that she could handle whatever life threw at her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, possibly including a fight for Lily's custody. But tonight, Sarah was content to hold her daughters close and remember how far they'd come from the desperate woman who had discovered her husband's betrayal in a doctor's office waiting room. The millionaire marriage secrets exposed years ago had ultimately led to a life that was more authentic, more meaningful, and more secure than anything she'd had before. Whatever Dr. Riverside wanted, whatever new betrayals or challenges awaited, Sarah Davidson was ready to face them with the strength she discovered in herself and the unbreakable bond she shared with her daughters. The meeting with Dr. Jonathan Riverside took place in Emma's downtown law office, with recording equipment running and a court stenographer present to document every word. Sarah had insisted on maximum legal protection for what she suspected would be another attempt to manipulate and control her family. Dr. Riverside looked older than his 62 years, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes that suggested the weight of carrying significant secrets. He was accompanied by his own attorney, a nervous-looking man who seemed uncomfortable with whatever his client was about to reveal. "Mrs. Davidson," Dr. Riverside began, his voice heavy with what appeared to be genuine remorse. "I want to start by apologizing for the circumstances that brought us here. What happened at my clinic was unconscionable, and I take full responsibility for the pain and confusion I've caused your family." Sarah remained silent, letting Emma take the lead in questioning the man who might be Lily's biological father. "Dr. Riverside," Emma said formally, "you've requested this meeting to discuss the circumstances of Lily Davidson's conception. What specifically do you want Mrs. Davidson to know, Dr.?" Riverside glanced at his attorney, who nodded reluctantly. "I want her to know the truth about what happened during her IVF treatments, and I want to make amends for the deception that occurred." "What deception?" Sarah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Mrs. Davidson, during your fertility treatments, your husband requested specific genetic modifications to ensure your child would have certain characteristics. He was very particular about intelligence, athletic ability, and physical appearance." Sarah felt confused. "Rick never mentioned anything about genetic modifications. We were told we were using his sperm and my eggs through standard IVF procedures." Dr. Riverside's expression grew more troubled. "That's what we told you, but it wasn't the truth. Your husband paid me a substantial sum to use genetic material from a different donor, someone with the specific traits he wanted for his child." The heartbreaking family drama was taking another devastating turn. Sarah realized that not only was Lily not Rick's biological daughter, but Rick had known this all along and had deliberately chosen to deceive Sarah about the circumstances of their daughter's conception. "So Rick knew Lily wasn't his biological child?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "He knew, and he requested it. He said he wanted a child who would be superior to any child his natural genetics could produce. He was very specific about wanting a donor with advanced degrees, athletic achievements, and what he called optimal physical characteristics." Emma was taking detailed notes. "Dr. Riverside, are you saying that Mr. Davidson essentially purchased a custom-designed child without his wife's knowledge or consent?" "That's exactly what I'm saying. And I facilitated it because he paid me $500,000 to falsify the records and use genetic material from my private donor catalog instead of his own." Sarah felt like she was going to be sick. Rick's betrayal had extended even to the conception of their child. He had treated Lily like a commodity to be designed and purchased, rather than a child to be loved unconditionally. "Who is Lily's biological father?" Sarah asked. Dr. Riverside hesitated before answering. "A former Olympic swimmer named Marcus Chen, who also happens to hold a PhD in biomedical engineering from Stanford. He matched all of your husband's specifications for intelligence, athleticism, and physical characteristics. The name Marcus Chen was familiar, and Sarah realized with growing horror why she recognized it. Marcus Chen is David Chen's older brother, she said slowly. Dr. Riverside nodded. Yes, David Chen was actually the one who referred his brother to my donor program. He thought his brother's genetics would be perfect for wealthy clients who wanted exceptional children. The web of deception was even more complex than Sarah had imagined. David hadn't just lied about his relationship with Isabella. He'd been connected to the fraud surrounding Lily's conception as well. His entire relationship with Sarah had been built on lies within lies. Dr. Riverside, Emma said carefully, why are you telling us this now? What do you want from Mrs. Davidson? I want to make amends. My clinic is being shut down. I'm facing criminal charges, and I'm dying of pancreatic cancer. I have maybe 6 months to live, and I want to clear my conscience about the children who were conceived through my fraudulent practices. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. This contains all the real medical records from Lily's conception, including the genetic testing that proves Marcus Chen is her biological father. I also have documentation of the payment your ex-husband made to ensure Lily would have specific genetic traits. Sarah stared at the folder that contained the truth about her daughter's origins. Part of her wanted to burn it and pretend this conversation had never happened. Lily was her daughter, regardless of genetics or the circumstances of her conception. There's something else, Dr. Riverside continued. Marcus Chen has been made aware that he has a biological daughter he never knew about. He's requested the opportunity to meet Lily and possibly establish a relationship with her. Sarah felt her protective instinct surge. Absolutely not. Lily is my daughter. I don't care who provided the genetic material. She's mine, and I won't have her life disrupted by strangers who want to play father. Mrs. Davidson, Dr. Riverside's attorney interjected. Mr. Chen isn't seeking custody or trying to disrupt your family. He simply wants the opportunity to know his biological daughter and perhaps provide for her future if you're willing. Emma held up a hand to stop the conversation. Let's be very clear about something. Mrs. Davidson carried Lily for 9 months, gave birth to her, and has been her sole caring parent for 3 years. No genetic contribution gives anyone else automatic rights to this child. Of course not, Dr. Riverside agreed. But Mrs. Davidson deserves to know the full truth about her daughter's conception, and Lily deserves to know her complete genetic and medical history. Sarah looked at the folder containing Lily's true origins and felt overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation. Every aspect of her marriage to Rick had been built on lies, not just his affairs and financial crimes, but even the conception of their child had been fraudulent. I need time to process this, Sarah said finally, and I need to consult with additional legal counsel about what rights anyone else might have regarding Lily. Mrs. Davidson, Dr. Riverside said quietly, I understand your reluctance to trust anyone after what you've been through, but I hope you'll consider allowing Marcus Chen to meet Lily, not because he has any legal claim to her, but because he's a good man who could enrich her life. How do you know he's a good man? Sarah asked sharply. How do I know this isn't another setup, another con game designed to manipulate me? Dr. Riverside's expression was sad, but understanding. You don't know that, and you have every right to be suspicious. But Marcus Chen is a professor at UCLA. He's never been married, he has no other children, and he's dedicated his life to medical research that helps sick children. He's not looking for custody or trying to replace you as Lily's parent. He just wants to know the child who shares his genetics. Emma collected all the documents Dr. Riverside had provided. We'll review everything and get back to you about how Mrs. Davidson wants to proceed. In the meantime, I want it clearly understood that any contact with Lily must be approved by her mother. After Dr. Riverside and his attorney left, Sarah sat in Emma's office feeling emotionally drained and overwhelmed by the new revelations about her daughter's conception. Emma, what am I supposed to do with this information? How do I tell Lily that her father isn't really her father? That she was essentially designed and purchased like a custom car? You don't have to tell her anything right now, Emma replied. Lily is 3 years old. She doesn't need to understand the complexity of her conception until she's much older. But what about Marcus Chen? What if he really is a good person who could be positive in Lily's life? Emma was quiet for several minutes, reviewing the documents Dr. Riverside had provided. Sarah, I've learned to be very suspicious of anyone who enters your life claiming to want to help or provide for your children. But these medical records look legitimate, and Dr. Riverside doesn't seem to have any financial motive for lying at this point. So you think I should consider letting this Marcus Chen meet Lily? I think you should have him thoroughly investigated first. If he checks out, if he really is who Dr. Riverside claims he is, then maybe a carefully supervised meeting could be beneficial for Lily. She could use positive male role models in her life. Sarah drove home to Malibu feeling like her carefully reconstructed world was shifting again. She'd worked so hard to create stability and security for her daughters, and now she was facing the possibility of introducing another unknown factor into their lives. Madison was waiting in the kitchen when Sarah arrived, her expression concerned. Mom, how did the meeting go? What did Dr. Riverside want? Sarah looked at her 19-year-old daughter, who had already survived so much trauma and upheaval, and tried to figure out how to explain the latest revelation about their family's complicated history. Sweetheart, it's complicated. It turns out that Dad knew Lily wasn't his biological daughter because he specifically requested that the clinic use a different donor's genetic material. Madison stared at her mother in disbelief. Dad planned for Lily not to be his biological child. Apparently, he wanted a child with specific genetic traits that he didn't think his own genetics could provide. He paid the clinic to use genetic material from someone else without telling me. That's sick, Madison said with disgust. He treated Lily like she was some kind of science project instead of his daughter. There's more. Lily's biological father is a man named Marcus Chen, who is David Chen's older brother. Madison sank into one of the kitchen chairs, processing the implications. So David was connected to the fraud around Lily's conception too. It appears that way. I don't know yet how much David knew about the situation, but his brother was the genetic donor Rick chose for Lily. Mom, this is insane. How many more lies and betrayals are we going to discover about our family? Sarah sat beside her daughter and took her hands. I don't know, sweetheart. But what I do know is that none of these revelations change who we are as a family. You're my daughter, Lily is my daughter, and we've built a good life together despite all the chaos and deception we've uncovered. What happens now? Does this Marcus Chen guy want to meet Lily? He's requested the opportunity, but I haven't decided what I think is best for Lily. She's only 3 years old, and she's been through enough disruption in her short life. Madison was quiet for several minutes, thinking through the implications. Mom, maybe it would be good for Lily to have a positive male role model in her life. Dad is in prison, David turned out to be a liar, and Rick's father has never shown much interest in being a grandfather. You think I should consider letting Marcus Chen meet Lily? I think you should investigate him thoroughly first, but if he really is a good person who could enrich Lily's life, then maybe it's worth considering. Lily deserves to know where she comes from, and she deserves to have people in her life who love her unconditionally. That evening, after Lily was asleep, Sarah sat on her deck overlooking the Pacific Ocean and reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's fraud had survived criminal trials, custody battles, financial ruin, and multiple personal betrayals. She'd rebuilt her life into something stronger and more authentic than what she'd lost. She'd created a successful business that helped other women navigate similar challenges. She'd raised 2 incredible daughters who had survived trauma and emerged with compassion and wisdom. Now she faced another decision that could significantly impact their family's future. Should she allow Lily to meet her biological father? Should she risk introducing another unknown factor into their carefully constructed stability? As she watched the sunset over the ocean, Sarah realized that the decision ultimately came down to what was best for Lily. Her daughter deserved to know her complete medical history, her genetic heritage, and the truth about her origins when she was old enough to understand it. If Marcus Chen proved to be a genuine, caring person who could contribute positively to Lily's life, then perhaps Sarah's job as a mother was to facilitate that relationship while protecting Lily from any potential harm. The midlife empowerment triumph wasn't just about financial success or personal independence. It was about having the wisdom and strength to make difficult decisions in her children's best interests. Even when those decisions involved risk and uncertainty, Sarah pulled out her phone and called Emma. I want you to have Marcus Chen investigated thoroughly. Background check, financial records, personal references, everything. If he checks out as genuine, I'll consider allowing him to meet Lily under carefully controlled circumstances. That sounds like a wise approach, Emma replied. And Sarah, whatever you decide, remember that you've already proven you can handle whatever life throws at you. You've got this. As Sarah ended the call and prepared for bed, she felt cautiously optimistic about the future. The heartbreaking truth about Lily's conception was just another challenge to overcome, another opportunity to demonstrate that the Davidson women were stronger than any deception or betrayal. Tomorrow would bring new decisions and new challenges. But tonight Sarah was content knowing that she was approaching this situation with wisdom earned through hard experience and strength forged through surviving the unthinkable. The female empowerment after millionaire marriage betrayal had evolved into something even more powerful. The confidence to trust her own judgment while remaining open to possibilities that could enrich her daughter's lives. 5 years later, Sarah stood at the altar of a small chapel in Napa Valley, wearing a simple but elegant ivory dress that she had chosen herself, paid for with her own money, and worn for her own happiness rather than anyone else's expectations. The woman beside her, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the child psychologist who had helped Lily navigate the complex emotions of learning about her biological father, smiled as they exchanged vows that represented genuine love and mutual respect. Madison, now 24 and completing her master's degree in social work, served as Sarah's maid of honor. 8-year-old Lily, who understood far more about her family's complicated history than most children her age, scattered flower petals with the serious concentration she brought to everything she did. The wedding was small and intimate, attended only by the people who had supported Sarah through her journey from betrayed wife to independent businesswoman to finally, a woman ready to love and be loved authentically. Marcus Chen sat in the third row, having earned his place in their extended family through 5 years of patient, respectful involvement in Lily's life. He had never tried to replace Sarah as Lily's parent or claim rights he didn't deserve. Instead, he had become something like a beloved uncle, someone who enriched Lily's life with his knowledge of science, his athletic training, and his genuine affection for the remarkable little girl who shared his genetics. Emma stood as Sarah's other witness, tears streaming down her face as she watched her best friend marry for love rather than security, for partnership rather than status, for joy rather than obligation. Do you, Sarah Davidson, take Elena Rodriguez to be your lawfully wedded wife, to love and cherish in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for as long as you both shall live? The officiant asked. I do, Sarah replied, her voice strong and certain in a way it had never been during her first marriage. As they kissed to seal their union, Sarah felt a contentment and wholeness she had never experienced before. The financial recovery after husband affair had evolved into something much more profound, a complete recovery of her ability to trust, to love, and to believe in the possibility of genuine partnership. The reception was held at a winery overlooking the Napa Valley, with vineyard views that reminded Sarah how far she had traveled from the sterile wealth of her first marriage to this organic, authentic celebration of real love. Mom, Madison said during her maid of honor speech, when I was 17 and our world fell apart, I thought happiness was something that happened to other people. I thought we were destined to always be defined by Dad's betrayal and the chaos he created. She paused to collect herself, looking out at the small gathering of people who had become their chosen family. But watching you rebuild our lives, create a business that helps other women, and find love with someone who sees and appreciates exactly who you are, that taught me that we get to write our own stories. We don't have to stay victims of other people's choices. Sarah felt tears of gratitude and pride as she listened to her daughter speak about their journey with such wisdom and perspective. Elena, Madison continued, turning toward Sarah's new wife. Thank you for loving my mom completely, for embracing our complicated family history, and for showing Lily and me what a healthy relationship looks like. As the evening wound down and guests began to say their goodbyes, Sarah stepped onto the winery's terrace with Elena, looking out over the valley that had become their new beginning. Any regrets? Elena asked, taking Sarah's hand in hers. Only that it took me so long to understand what real love feels like. Sarah replied, everything I went through with Rick, all the betrayal and pain and struggle, it was worth it because it led me to you and to this life we've built together. Elena squeezed her hand. I love that our relationship isn't based on rescuing each other or filling voids left by past trauma. We chose each other from positions of strength and independence. And we're going to keep choosing each other every day, Sarah agreed, as they prepared to leave for their honeymoon in Costa Rica, a trip they had planned together, paid for with money they had both earned, and designed around shared interests rather than impressive destinations. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. For a moment, the old anxiety spiked. Unknown numbers and unexpected messages had been sources of disruption and betrayal throughout her journey. But as she read this message, Sarah felt only curiosity rather than fear. Mrs. Davidson Rodriguez, this is Attorney James Mitchell representing the estate of Isabella Martinez. Mrs. Martinez passed away last week, and she left specific instructions for you to receive this information. There are things about your ex-husband's case that were never revealed during his trial, things that will change everything you thought you knew about what happened to your family. Sarah showed the message to Elena, who read it with a frown. Do you want to deal with this now, or wait until after our honeymoon? Elena asked. Now, Sarah said without hesitation. I'm done letting other people's secrets and lies lurk in the shadows of our lives. Whatever Isabella has to reveal, I want to know about it immediately. She called the attorney's number, putting the phone on speaker so Elena could hear the conversation. Mr. Mitchell, this is Sarah Davidson Rodriguez. I got your message about Isabella Martinez. What information did she want me to have? Mrs. Davidson Rodriguez. Ms. Martinez left a very detailed confession about the events surrounding your divorce from Richard Davidson. According to her statement, your ex-husband's crimes were far more extensive than what came out during his trial. Sarah felt Elena's hand squeeze hers in support. What kind of crimes? Ms. Martinez claims that your ex-husband was involved in human trafficking operations, that the fertility clinic where your daughter was conceived was part of a larger scheme to sell children designed with specific genetic traits, and that your daughter Lily was intended to be sold to buyers overseas. The world seemed to stop spinning as Sarah processed what she was hearing. Rick's betrayal had been even worse than she'd imagined. He hadn't just committed fraud and adultery. He had been involved in trafficking children, including potentially their own daughter. That's impossible, Sarah whispered. Lily was never in danger of being sold. She was born into our family. According to Ms. Martinez's confession, your discovery of the affair disrupted your ex-husband's timeline. He was supposed to convince you to give up Lily for adoption to a wealthy family overseas, claiming medical complications made it too dangerous for you to raise her. Sarah felt sick as she remembered Rick's behavior during her pregnancy with Lily. He had indeed suggested adoption several times, claiming concerns about her health and their financial situation. She had refused to consider it, but now she realized those suggestions might have been part of a larger plan to traffic their child. Ms. Martinez also claims that your ex-husband's financial crimes were funding a network of fertility clinics that were essentially operating as illegal adoption mills, designing and selling children to wealthy buyers who wanted specific genetic traits. Elena looked at Sarah with concern. Are you okay? Do you need to sit down? Sarah felt dizzy but forced herself to keep listening. Mr. Mitchell, why didn't Isabella reveal this information during Rick's trial? She claims she was afraid for her own safety and the safety of her children, but knowing she was dying, she wanted to make sure you understood the full scope of what your ex-husband was involved in. Is there evidence to support these claims? Ms. Martinez left detailed records, financial documents, and recorded conversations that appear to substantiate her accusations. The FBI is reopening their investigation into your ex-husband's activities. Sarah ended the call and sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what she just learned. Rick hadn't just betrayed their marriage and stolen their money. He had been involved in trafficking children, potentially including Lily. Sarah, Elena said gently, this doesn't change anything about who Lily is or how much you love her. She's your daughter. She's safe, and she's part of our family. But what if she was really meant to be sold to strangers? What if Rick was planning to take her away from me from the very beginning? Then you saved her by being strong enough to leave him when you discovered his betrayal. You protected her without even knowing the full extent of what you were protecting her from. Sarah realized Elena was right. Her decision to divorce Rick and fight for custody of her daughters hadn't just been about protecting them from his financial crimes. It had unknowingly saved Lily from being trafficked to strangers who saw her as a commodity rather than a child to be loved. Do you think Marcus knows about any of this? Sarah asked. We'll have to ask him, but I doubt it. If he was involved in child trafficking, I don't think he would have spent 5 years building a genuine relationship with Lily. He seems to genuinely care about her welfare. As Sarah and Elena drove back to their hotel, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pregnant wife betrayed by her husband's affair had ultimately discovered that the betrayal was far worse than adultery or financial fraud. It had been a threat to her children's safety and freedom. But the revelation also highlighted how much strength Sarah had found within herself. Without knowing the full scope of Rick's crimes, she had made decisions that protected her daughters from dangers she couldn't have imagined. Elena, Sarah said as they prepared for bed in their honeymoon suite, I'm grateful for everything I went through to get to this moment. Even learning about Rick's involvement in child trafficking, it makes me appreciate how far we've come and how strong our family has become. Are you going to tell Madison and Lily about Isabella's confession? I'll tell Madison when we get back from our honeymoon. She's old enough to understand the full scope of what Rick was involved in. As for Lily, I'll wait until she's older to share the more disturbing details. But she deserves to know that she was always meant to be loved and protected, never sold or traded. Elena pulled Sarah into her arms, holding her close as they looked out at the stars over Napa Valley. You know what I love most about our story, Elena said. What's that? We didn't meet during your crisis or trauma. We met after you had already rebuilt your life, after you had already become the strong, independent, successful woman you were meant to be. Our love is built on who you are now, not on rescuing you from who you used to be. Sarah felt tears of gratitude for the woman who loved her completely, for the daughters who had survived everything with her, for the extended family they had created with people like Marcus and Emma, who had proven their loyalty and love over time. The Millionaire Affair sequel setup had become something entirely different. Not a story of continued victimization, but a story of ultimate triumph over the worst kinds of betrayal and manipulation. As Sarah drifted off to sleep in Elena's arms, she thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago. Pregnant, betrayed, financially ruined, and terrified of the future. That woman could never have imagined the joy, security, and authentic love that defined Sarah's life now. The heartbreaking family drama had evolved into a story of healing, empowerment, and the kind of love that comes from choosing partners who see and appreciate your strength rather than trying to exploit your vulnerabilities. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The FBI investigation, media attention from the reopened case, and the process of helping her daughters understand the full truth about their father's crimes. But tonight, Sarah was content to hold on to the peace and joy she had earned through surviving the unthinkable and building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. The final twist in Rick's web of deception had been revealed, but it no longer had the power to destroy Sarah's happiness. She had become someone who could handle any truth, face any challenge, and protect her family from any threat. The pregnant wife betrayed by her millionaire husband's fraud had become Sarah Davidson Rodriguez, successful businesswoman, devoted mother, loving wife, and proof that women can not only survive the worst betrayals, but can use those experiences to build lives that are more authentic, more secure, and more joyful than anything they lost.